She watched the man she married walk into their charity gala with another woman on his arm. She was 6 months pregnant. But what she did next silenced the entire ballroom and changed his life forever. To my beautiful family watching right now, welcome home. Whether you're new here or returning, I want you to know you're not alone. The story you're about to hear isn't just about betrayal. It's about power, motherhood, strength, and a shocking twist that left a millionaire CEO begging for a second chance he never deserved. If you believe women deserve better than humiliation, if you've ever loved someone who forgot your worth, this story will hit deep. So please, like this video right now, comment your thoughts along the way, and subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories. Your support means the world. The gala was always their night. Each year, Serena Reed and her husband Dominic stood side by side on the steps of the Fairmont Hotel, smiling for photographers, shaking hands with donors, and giving speeches that moved even the coldest tech billionaires to tears. But this year, everything changed. At 35 and glowing with pregnancy after years of failed IVF treatments, Serena had designed her dress to show strength, not shame. Soft gold silk wrapped around her bump. Her curls were swept up in a bun that crowned her confidence. This wasn't just another charity event. This was her moment to reclaim the love she'd fought so long to hold on to. She arrived early, as always. "Everything looks beautiful," said Iris Jung, her best friend and the foundation's director. "You've outdone yourself." Serena smiled, rubbing her belly. "This work, helping kids get access to technology, it means more now that I'm bringing a child into the world." Behind the elegant centerpieces and crystal chandeliers, though, her heart was anxious. Dominic hadn't answered her last 2 texts. He said he had a late meeting and would meet her at the venue. He had said that before. At 8:30 p.m. sharp, the air shifted. Whispers, camera flashes, all eyes turning toward the entrance. And then, him, Dominic Reed, her husband. But he wasn't alone. Valentina Cortez was draped on his arm like an accessory made of red satin and sin. Her dress clung to her like a dare. She smiled for the cameras, diamonds sparkling against her chest, a clear statement, "I belong here now." Serena froze. It wasn't a rumor. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't her hormones. It was real. He brought his mistress to their event. Their baby kicked, and she placed a hand on her belly to steady herself. Around her, polite gasps turned into full-blown murmurs. "Did you know?" Iris whispered, eyes wide. Serena shook her head, silent. Her husband couldn't even look her in the eye. Serena slipped away down a hallway, gripping her belly like a shield. Her throat burned, her vision blurred, but she didn't let a single tear fall. Not yet. In the quiet of the marble corridor, she took a deep breath and said softly, "You are loved, baby girl. Even if he forgets us tonight, I won't." She wasn't sure how long she stood there. Minutes, maybe. Long enough to hear her own heart say, "Go back. Don't hide. You didn't come this far to disappear now." Back inside, Dominic was already sinking. Valentina clung to him like a trophy, but the room had shifted. Smiles were tight. Donors avoided him. Board members frowned. Marcus Calloway, his longtime mentor and the company's largest investor, walked up with steel in his eyes. "A word, Dominic." "Now." Valentina blinked, confused. In the corner, Marcus hissed, "Have you lost your damn mind? You brought her here. Your wife is carrying your child while you're playing house with an employee. Do you understand the damage you've done?" Dominic tried to defend himself, but there were no excuses. Just silence. Until suddenly, the microphone on stage buzzed to life. A voice rang through the ballroom, calm and clear. "Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm Serena Reed, co-founder of this foundation, and the woman who built this dream with her husband." The room stopped breathing. Dominic turned. Valentina's grip on his arm loosened. And there Serena stood, backlit by the chandeliers, elegant, dignified, glowing with fury and grace. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She told the truth. And then she told the world what they never expected. She said, "Dominic, I've known about Valentina for months, But I chose to wait, not out of fear, but out of purpose, and she dropped the first bomb. 3 days ago, I uncovered financial records, millions stolen from our children's programs, money rerouted into shell companies that lead to Valentina Cortez's private accounts. Another breath. I filed charges yesterday, with the board's full support, and I waited until tonight. Because you both deserve to be exposed here, among the very people you lied to. Gasps, cries, screams. Security moved in. Valentina tried to run. Dominic turned pale. And Serena, standing tall and unbroken, looked him in the eye and said, "I would have forgiven the affair. But stealing from children, I won't forget that." Let me pause right there, because I want to hear from you. If you've ever had to choose dignity over heartbreak, drop A or A in the comments. If you believe women should never be silenced when they've been disrespected, smash that like button. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories and share this with someone who needs courage today. This story only gets more intense from here. You won't believe what happens when the mistress turns on the CEO, or how a pregnant wife walks away stronger than ever. This is a short story, but the lessons, they'll last forever. Let's continue. They weren't supposed to meet. Serena Talbot and Dominic Reed lived in different lanes of campus life. She studied neuroscience with a scholarship and 2 part-time jobs. He built code like other people breathed, and treated lectures like optional entertainment. She wore glasses with scratches on one lens and carried highlighters in every shade. He showed up in black hoodies and carried energy drinks more often than notebooks. But Stanford had a way of making strange pairs. Their paths crossed in junior year when both enrolled in a cross-disciplinary program on medical technology innovation. The goal: teams of 2 would create viable tech solutions to real problems in public health. The prize: a $10,000 startup grant. Serena didn't care about the prize. She wanted a challenge. Dominic didn't care about the challenge. He wanted the money. So when their names appeared on the assignment list as partners, Serena groaned. "That's the guy who skips half the sessions," she told her roommate. Dominic, reading the same list, raised a brow. "Talbot, isn't she the one who argues with professors for fun?" Their first meeting was a clash. Serena came in with a printed research outline and 5 potential project directions. Dominic arrived 10 minutes late with nothing but a laptop and the confidence of someone who'd already won. "You came empty-handed?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "I came with ideas," he said flatly. "That's heavier than paperwork." She didn't like him, not at first. But 3 hours later, they were still sitting at the campus cafe, arguing about neurofeedback applications and AI-based rehabilitation therapy. They disagreed on everything, but the conversation never dragged. For every theory she brought, he had a way to digitize it. For every model he sketched, she had data to validate it. By midnight, the waitress stopped asking if they needed anything. They were so locked in they barely noticed the cafe closing around them. That night sparked a rhythm neither expected. They worked together every evening for weeks, sometimes in her lab, sometimes on his beat-up couch. He teased her for taking detailed notes in color-coded tabs. She mocked his obsession with efficiency. When he fell asleep mid-code one night, she covered him with her jacket before leaving the lab. One evening, after presenting a prototype to faculty and health professionals, they walked back to the dorms under quiet sky. "Do you ever stop working?" she asked. "Do you?" he replied. Serena hesitated, then smiled. "I guess we're both a little crazy." He turned toward her, a rare softness in his expression. "Maybe that's why this works." That was the first time she looked at him and didn't just see a teammate. She saw a man who didn't need much from the world, except space to build, and someone who believed in him while he did. They didn't label anything. They didn't announce anything. They just kept showing up. Through thesis deadlines and prototype revisions, through sleepless nights and energy crash afternoons. They studied together, skipped lectures together, failed lab simulations together, and laughed about it after. By graduation, their project had won the grant. But the real win was something else, something growing quietly between them. While most of their classmates moved cities or chased six-figure job offers, Serena and Dominic stayed. She entered a PhD program in neuroscience. He took his winnings and launched his first product, a basic analytics tool for cognitive performance training. It didn't take off right away, but he was obsessed. They rented a small place on the edge of Palo Alto. The furniture was mismatched. The fridge was often empty, but they were building something. Serena supported them both. Her grad stipend covered rent, groceries, and Dominic's late-night pizza runs. She never complained. She believed in his vision, and more than that, she believed in the man he was becoming. He called her his compass. She called him her fire. They were equals, even in silence. She never once doubted his potential. He never once questioned her worth. They spent birthdays building websites and holidays editing business plans. On weekends, she helped him create pitch decks. On Mondays, he walked her to the hospital when she had early lab rounds. When he launched Reed Innovations from a folding table in their kitchen, she was the one who made his first spreadsheet. There were no diamond rings, no dramatic proposals, no candlelit declarations. What they had was better. They had loyalty. A quiet, steady loyalty. The kind that doesn't flinch when money's tight or nerves fray. At the end of their third year together, they finally decided to get married. Not with a big ceremony, but at a courthouse on a rainy Thursday. They wore jeans. They kissed like it was enough. Because it was. Serena never asked for luxury. She never wanted spotlight. She just wanted partnership. Dominic gave her that until life started changing faster than they could hold on to. But in the beginning, there was no ego, no selfishness, no noise. Just two minds that found each other in a sea of ambition. Two hearts that found home in a world full of distractions. And for a while, that was everything. 3 months into their marriage, Serena got the offer she had dreamed of since undergrad. It came in a thick envelope with a Harvard Medical School seal, and the header read, Postdoctoral Research Fellowship in Neural Systems and Cognitive Recovery. The program was competitive, elite, and fully funded. It meant access to groundbreaking technology, clinical trials, and a pipeline to one of the top neurological institutes in the country. She stared at the letter in silence. She didn't smile, because she already knew what it meant. To accept the offer, she would need to leave California for 3 years. Leave Dominic. Leave the little apartment where she'd watched his company crawl from concept to life. Leave the late nights, the coffee-fueled brainstorming, the shared exhaustion, the startup babies they'd built together. He came home from a pitch meeting that day and found her sitting on the couch with the envelope still unopened. I got it, she said. He didn't ask, got what? He already knew. They had talked about it for years. Serena's mentors believed she'd be a leader in the field, and she had worked for it. Every late shift in the lab, every grant proposal she submitted, every conference she flew to on her own dime. She deserved this. Dominic sat beside her, quiet. You should go, he said eventually. This is what you worked for. But the words didn't feel right. They came out flat. His hand didn't reach for hers, and Serena felt it deep in her chest, the shift. He was proud of her, yes, but he was also terrified. Terrified she might outgrow him. Terrified that while he was still bootstrapping his company, she'd be shaking hands with Nobel Prize winners. Terrified that distance might change the way she looked at him. So she said the words before he could. I'm not going. He turned, startled. What? I'm not going, she repeated. Serena, don't do that. Not for me. I'm not doing it for you, she said calmly. I'm doing it with you. If we're building something, this business, this marriage, then I need to be here. He opened his mouth to protest, but she cut him off. I'm not giving up on neuroscience. I'm pausing. There's a difference. She said it like a scientist would, cleanly, logically, as if the pain wasn't already gnawing at the edge of her heart. Dominic didn't argue. He kissed her, held her, promised he'd make it worth it. She believed him. For the next year, Serena restructured her life around Reed Innovations. She left her PhD program quietly, explaining to her advisors that she needed time for personal decisions. They didn't press. They respected her. But they also knew what this meant. In professional circles, absence speaks louder than announcements. By the end of that year, Serena's name disappeared from conference panels and medical journals. She became someone who had potential, past tense. But Serena didn't dwell on what she gave up. She threw herself into the business. She helped build the brand identity, crafted the first internal health tech proposal, and even created a startup mentorship initiative targeting minority female students in STEM. That was her heart, using science to bring opportunity where it was often withheld. She brought grace to boardrooms and credibility to Dominic's vision. Investors noticed. So did clients. Soon, journalists began describing Serena as the quiet power behind Reed Innovations. She never asked for the spotlight, but people saw her work. Dominic did too, at least at first. The deeper he got into CEO life, the more distant he became. Dinners were often cut short by business calls. Vacations were postponed again and again. Meetings ran into midnight. When she told him she missed the lab, he nodded distractedly. "I know. I'll make time soon." But he didn't. He became consumed by growth, expansion, the next funding round, the next product launch. Serena started eating dinner alone, started watching him fall asleep on the couch with his phone still in hand. She told herself it was a phase, that the fire he had in the beginning would come back. But weeks turned to months, and Serena began to feel something she hadn't in years. Invisible. Not because she lacked accomplishments, but because the man she had once called her partner had stopped seeing her. He no longer asked what she was working on. He stopped thanking her for managing PR crises or organizing community outreach. The Serena he used to brag about in pitch meetings was now reduced to a footnote. One night, she sat in the office's break room, eating reheated lasagna, and overheard a new hire whisper, "She used to be someone, right?" Those words sank deep. She used to be someone, used to be brilliant, used to be talked about in scientific circles, used to be a rising star. Now she was the CEO's wife, and he didn't even come home for dinner. The company grew faster than anyone predicted. One deal turned into 10. A local contract with a Bay Area hospital chain caught the attention of venture capitalists. By the end of the second year, Reed Innovations had moved from a rented co-working space into its own floor in a downtown high-rise. With each success, Dominic grew more focused, more driven, more obsessed. Serena watched it happen gradually, how the man who used to scribble goals on napkins now studied quarterly projections like scripture. His desk, once cluttered with ramen cups and caffeine cans, now held stock reports, risk assessments, and luxury catalogs. He wasn't just chasing growth anymore. He was chasing status. First, it was the clothes. Custom suits, cufflinks, watches with names he never used to care about. Then came the cars, the private investors, the magazine features. He started dining with people who spoke in numbers and viewed empathy as a flaw. People who clapped him on the back and told him he was next level while eyeing Serena like she didn't belong in the conversation. At first, she tried to play along. She hosted the networking events, smiled at the right people, wore the dresses he bought her, even though they didn't feel like her. But the more she bent to fit into his new world, the less he seemed to notice her at all. Their conversations became transactional. Did the proposal get sent? Yes. Board meeting is at 10 tomorrow. Can you handle the press follow-up? I already did. There were days when the only thing he said to her was, "Coffee?" And even then, he didn't look up from his screen. At night, he slept with one hand curled around his phone. When she reached for him, he didn't pull away, but he didn't pull her close either. Serena told herself he was under pressure, that once the next milestone was reached, he'd slow down, that the man she married, the one who listened, the one who saw her, would come back. But deep down, she feared the truth. Success hadn't sharpened him. It had hollowed him. There was a moment, small but unforgettable, that confirmed it. They had been invited to a private dinner hosted by a major investor. Serena spent hours preparing. She wore her mother's gold earrings, styled her hair with soft curls, read up on the other guests to hold her own in conversation. When Dominic picked her up, he barely looked at her. No compliment, no smile. Just don't bring up anything medical tonight. These people aren't into that. She bit the inside of her cheek. Got it. At the dinner, he introduced her as my wife, Serena, with no mention of her role at the company, no mention of her background, no acknowledgement of who she was beyond the label. She played the part. She laughed when expected. She smiled until her cheeks hurt. But when they got home, she walked straight to the guest room and cried into a towel. It was the first time she didn't want him to hear her, because part of her no longer cared if he did. She started showing up to the office less. Not because she was angry, because she was tired. Tired of giving and getting silence in return. Tired of being the woman who built the first floor of the empire but wasn't invited upstairs. She buried herself in the foundation's work, using Reed Innovations resources to provide tech education for children in underserved schools. That, at least, gave her purpose. That reminded her of who she used to be. But at home, Dominic was disappearing, piece by piece. He still came home, still wore his ring, still kissed her forehead on his way out the door. But none of it meant anything when his eyes were always somewhere else. She started hearing about his business dinners from other people, started noticing missed calls that he didn't explain, started finding receipts for 2 at restaurants he never mentioned. The trust between them didn't break all at once. It eroded, like a house slowly eaten by water until the foundation gives way, and by the time you notice the damage, it's already done. Serena didn't confront him, not yet, because part of her still hoped, not for the man in front of her, but for the one she had built everything with. The first time Serena missed her period, she smiled to herself before even taking the test. They hadn't been trying, but they hadn't been careful either. A part of her believed it was meant to happen. She placed the test on the bathroom counter and waited with shaking hands. Dominic was still asleep, breathing steady in the other room. When she saw the faint second line appear, her heart swelled with a joy she hadn't felt in years. For 10 minutes, she sat there, staring at the result like it was a miracle. She didn't wake him. She wanted to hold the moment a little longer, alone. But by the end of the week, she was bleeding. It wasn't dramatic. No trip to the hospital, no flashing alarms, just blood. Just loss. She didn't even tell Dominic until days later. He looked at her like she'd spoken another language. "I didn't know," he said, confused. "You weren't home," she replied quietly. They sat in silence for a while. He touched her knee. "We'll try again, right?" She nodded, but something inside her already knew this wasn't going to be easy. They tried for months. Nothing. Then years. Ovulation tests. Vitamins. Acupuncture. Appointments. Serena charted her cycle like it was her job. She woke up early for basal body temps. She drank teas she hated. She smiled politely through baby showers and avoided questions from friends and family who didn't mean harm, but hurt her just the same. Dominic, meanwhile, drifted in and out. He showed up for major appointments, but his eyes were always on his phone. He never said it, but she knew he blamed her. Once, during an argument over something unrelated, he muttered, "You track everything else. Why can't you figure this out?" The words sliced deeper than anything he'd ever said. He apologized that night, brought her flowers, took her to dinner. She ate in silence. They eventually saw a fertility specialist. The diagnosis was labeled unexplained infertility. No one could point to anything specifically wrong, which somehow made it worse. It meant they had no answers, no clear path forward. Still, they pressed on. They did IUI, then IVF, round after round. Hormone injections became routine. Serena bruised at the waist from needles. She smiled in public, collapsed in private. The emotional weight became harder than the physical. Each failed round felt like failure as a woman, as a wife, as a human being. Dominic became less supportive with each passing month. He stopped asking about appointments, stopped waiting in the clinic lobby. Once, He sent his assistant to pick her up from the fertility center after a procedure. His assistant. The final blow came during the 4th IVF cycle. They got pregnant. Confirmed heartbeat. 8 weeks in, Serena started cramping during a board meeting. She excused herself quietly and drove herself to the ER. No heartbeat. She sat alone in a hospital gown, cold and empty, staring at the screen while the technician offered a tissue. Dominic arrived an hour later. He didn't speak, didn't cry, just stood there, hands in pockets, like a man checking into a hotel. On the way home, Serena said, "Maybe we should stop." He didn't answer. She repeated, "Maybe we've lost too much already." He said, "Let's talk about it later." But they never did, because by then he'd already checked out. The next month, she found a text message on his work phone from someone named Valentina. It wasn't graphic, just one sentence, "You look distracted today." Was it her again? Serena stared at the screen for 10 minutes, reading it over and over. Was it her again? So was someone else. And that someone knew she existed. That changed everything. But she didn't confront him. Not then. Instead, she put the phone down, stood in the shower for an hour, and came out without saying a word. Because she wasn't going to break. Not after everything she'd already endured. Instead, she walked into the guest room, opened her laptop, and began researching independent grants for non-profit tech education. If she couldn't control her body, if she couldn't hold her marriage together, she would control something. She would build something. The foundation didn't begin with a press release or a ribbon cutting. It began with a girl named Zara. Serena had been volunteering at a weekend tutoring program in East Oakland, partly to escape the silence at home. One Saturday, a shy 11-year-old named Zara asked if she could stay late to finish her science project. Her mother was late picking her up. Serena offered to help. They sat together at a folding table while Zara drew diagrams of the human brain. Her eyes lit up when she explained the difference between the frontal and parietal lobes. Serena was impressed. "You ever used a virtual lab simulation?" Serena asked casually. Zara frowned. "What's that?" Serena blinked. "It's like a digital science lab. You can run experiments on screen, see the results in real time." The girl shook her head. "Our school has old computers. Most of them don't even turn on." Serena didn't sleep that night. She kept thinking about Zara and how many kids like her had the brainpower to change the world, but none of the tools. All because their zip code dictated their future. 2 weeks later, Serena drafted a simple idea. What if Reed Innovations created a branch that donated refurbished tech to schools in need? What if they paired hardware donations with software licenses and custom STEM curriculum? What if they went further and created scholarships, coding boot camps, and mentorship pipelines? She pitched it to Dominic over breakfast. He barely looked up from his phone. "That's good PR," he muttered. "Draw up a deck. We'll brand it as community engagement." It wasn't the reaction she wanted, but it was a green light. She didn't wait for a team. She started immediately. Serena named it the Bright Futures Foundation, a separate entity but powered by Reed Innovations. She reached out to school administrators. She hosted listening sessions with teachers. She hired curriculum consultants who specialized in tech education for underfunded districts. She traveled across California, speaking to parents, principals, and non-profits. It didn't take long to gain traction. Tech reporters picked up the story. They called it a refreshing step toward equity in education. Serena began appearing on panels and podcasts, her face slowly becoming more recognizable than Dominic's in some circles. She didn't care about fame. She cared about impact. Every time a student logged into their first coding lesson, every time a young girl touched her first tablet and whispered, "This is mine." Every time a school district sent back before and after test scores showing real improvement, Serena knew she had done something that mattered. The foundation gave her life a different rhythm. It became a space where she didn't have to explain her worth. She didn't have to wait to be seen. She led, created, and inspired with full freedom. It also became her refuge. At home, Dominic was slipping further away. He no longer asked about her day. He forgot anniversaries. He came home with perfume she didn't wear clinging to his shirt collar. Once, she heard him laugh over the phone late at night, the kind of laugh he hadn't shared with her in months. He claimed it was a client call. She said nothing. She had stopped expecting honesty, but she had not stopped hoping. And so, she poured everything into the foundation. She launched an annual fundraising gala. The first year brought in a modest $400,000. By the third year, they crossed the $2 million mark. Celebrities began attending. Other tech companies followed suit, donating, sponsoring, partnering. But no matter how large the event became, Serena made sure the focus stayed on the children. She kept Zara's photo on her desk, now in high school, thriving. In the face of personal collapse, Serena had built something indestructible. The world saw her as a changemaker. But deep inside, she was still the woman who once left Harvard for love. Still the woman who injected herself nightly, praying for a heartbeat that never came. Still the woman who watched her husband become a stranger. But now, she had something else too. She had legacy. And she had a community that believed in her, because she had never stopped believing in others. The irony wasn't lost on her. While her marriage was breaking quietly, her foundation was rising loudly. And one day, when Dominic would try to rewrite the story, when he would say she turned cold or distant or distracted, Serena would already know the truth. She hadn't left him. He had walked away first. She had simply chosen not to follow. Valentina Cortez walked into Reed Innovations like she already owned it. She was 29, polished from head to heel, with a resume crafted to impress and a smile that rarely reached her eyes. On paper, she was a marketing genius. In person, she moved like someone who didn't just want to succeed, she wanted to skip the line. Dominic interviewed her personally. That was rare. Normally, department heads handled hiring, but her application caught his eye, probably because it came recommended by one of his newest investors. She had worked at a high-profile fintech startup in New York and was known for launching campaigns that went viral. A recruiter's dream. During the interview, she wore a tailored grey dress and a watch that cost more than most interns' monthly rent. She spoke clearly, confidently, and without flattery. "I'm not looking for a job," she said plainly. "I'm looking to be part of a legacy." Dominic, who usually hated buzzwords, nodded anyway. By the end of their 30-minute meeting, she had secured not just a job offer, but an executive title, Director of Global Marketing. People noticed. Serena noticed, not because she was jealous, but because of how quickly Valentina inserted herself into every major meeting, every cross-department decision. Within weeks, her name was everywhere, on internal memos, client reports, and board updates. She didn't ask for permission. She asked for results. And she usually got them. Within 6 months, web traffic increased. Product interest spiked. Reed Innovations trended on tech blogs again. After a quiet quarter, Valentina knew how to spin a brand narrative. And she knew how to please Dominic, at least professionally. At first, the whispers started quietly. "She's always in his office. Didn't they have dinner again last night? I thought he was married." Serena didn't chase gossip. She had more important things to focus on: the foundation, grant reports, and preparing for another IVF cycle. But she wasn't blind. She saw the way Valentina looked at Dominic, like she already had a claim on him. And she saw how Dominic began to change again. He started dressing sharper, started skipping dinners more often, started smiling when his phone buzzed. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. But Serena didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, she observed. One afternoon, she passed by Dominic's office. The door was closed. Inside, laughter. Not just a chuckle, his laugh. The one she hadn't heard in months. She paused outside for a second too long, then kept walking. The company's expansion into Asia was a major win for Reed Innovations. After closing a deal with a robotics partner in Japan, Dominic scheduled a strategic trip to Tokyo, 5 days of meetings, presentations, and investor dinners. Valentina insisted on going. "We'll need someone from marketing there," she told him in a team meeting. Local engagement strategy has to be locked in from day one. Other executives raised their brows. It wasn't typical for marketing to join a technical expansion trip, but Dominic didn't object. "Book your flight," he said. From that moment, Valentina planned every detail. She knew exactly what she was doing. She booked herself in the same 5-star hotel, just 2 floors below him. She made sure their flights landed at the same time. She arranged to share a car to the welcome dinner. She wore a sleek black dress that didn't scream for attention, but made sure it was given. On the second night, they dined with a group of local investors at a high-rise sushi bar overlooking the city. Valentina spoke little but listened intently. When Dominic excused himself mid-dinner to take a call, she followed. "You've got their attention," she said, stepping into the hallway beside him. Dominic gave her a tired nod. "Long day." She tilted her head. "Or maybe you just need better company." He turned to look at her. For a moment, neither of them said anything. That silence was her signal. She stepped closer, not too close, but enough. "You ever feel like you've built something everyone wants a piece of, but no one actually understands you?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Sometimes." She nodded like she knew. That kind of loneliness can ruin men. He didn't respond, but he didn't walk away either. Later that night, he got a message from her room. "Need to run through tomorrow's presentation. Come by if you're still awake." He stared at the text, paused, and replied, "On my way." The Tokyo trip ended on a Friday. By Monday, the office wasn't the same. Valentina came in later than usual that morning. No rush, no apology. She wore a crisp white blazer with a bold lipstick shade Serena had never seen her wear before. She walked through the open space like she owned it, head high, phone in hand, unbothered. A new kind of silence followed her. Not fear, not respect, control. Something about her presence made others retreat. Interns avoided eye contact. Managers hesitated to challenge her ideas. Departments that once operated independently now ran every public-facing project through her office, even when it wasn't protocol. And the most telling sign? She never checked in with HR. She didn't need to. Dominic had cleared it. Valentina had become untouchable. At team meetings, her voice dominated. She answered questions not directed at her. She steered conversations back to her division. When someone tried to redirect the focus, she would smile politely and say, "Let's circle back to that. This piece is more urgent." And Dominic backed her every time, even when the numbers didn't. During one quarterly review, a product rollout had underperformed despite a massive marketing push. Analysts raised valid concerns. Valentina brushed them off. "We're tracking long-tail conversion. Early data doesn't tell the whole story." Dominic nodded. Agreed. Nobody pressed further. Serena sat in the back of that meeting, her arms folded, watching it all unfold. The tension was thick, but no one dared confront the obvious. Dominic had given her unchecked access, and Valentina was expanding her reach quickly. It didn't stop at strategy. Office culture began to shift. Friday team lunches became more selective. After-hours work sessions turned into invite-only drinks that never included Serena, even though she was still the CEO founder's wife. Once, a new hire mistakenly referred to Valentina as Mrs. Reed in an email. The employee apologized, but the damage was done. Dominic laughed it off. Serena didn't. She no longer recognized her husband's tone when he spoke in meetings. It had become clipped, corporate, and cold. The man who used to brainstorm app features with her over coffee now seemed disinterested when she pitched community outreach ideas. One afternoon, she walked past Dominic's glass office on her way to a call with foundation donors. Valentina was inside, perched on the edge of his desk, too close. He was reclined in his chair, relaxed in a way he hadn't been around Serena in months. They didn't see her, or they didn't care. She kept walking. A few days later, she requested a meeting with Dominic, not as a wife, but as the director of the foundation. "Valentina's involvement in non-marketing departments is creating confusion," Serena said. "Some of your senior staff are growing frustrated. People are working around her, not with her." Dominic didn't look up from his laptop. "She's efficient. I trust her judgment. She's consolidating influence outside her role. She gets things done." and other employees are afraid to speak up. That's a culture issue. Dominic finally glanced up. You've been distant lately. Maybe you're reading too much into this. Serena's jaw clenched. I've been managing a foundation, a team of 12, and funding 3 city-wide school initiatives without asking for your attention every step of the way. Dominic leaned back, arms crossed. You're overreacting. No, she said firmly. I'm observing. He didn't respond. And Serena walked out of that office knowing 2 things. He didn't respect her position anymore. And he didn't see Valentina as temporary. Back at her own desk, she reviewed internal documents, departmental approvals, budget reallocations, hiring freezes. Valentina's name appeared in areas she had no authority over. Her digital signature showed up on vendor contracts, some of them skipping over compliance review. It wasn't just proximity, it was quiet restructuring. Dominic was either complicit or blind. Both were dangerous. Later that week, Serena arrived early at the office to prepare for a press briefing. She turned the corner into the break room and froze. Dominic and Valentina were already there. She was sitting on the counter, sipping coffee from his mug. He was between her legs, whispering something into her ear. Serena didn't wait for them to notice her. She stepped back, walked to her car, and drove away. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She sat in a grocery store parking lot for 2 hours, staring out the window, hand resting on her flat stomach, wondering how she got there. That night, Dominic didn't come home. No call, no explanation, just an email at 11:13 p.m. with the subject line, out late, back tomorrow morning. The more space Valentina claimed, the more Serena retreated. Not out of fear, out of clarity. For a while, she had held on to the idea that if she worked harder, dressed better, spoke softer, or stood taller, Dominic would see her again. The man she'd built a life with. The man who once kissed her hand after every investor pitch. The man who used to bring her soup during study weeks and say, "We're in this together." That man hadn't disappeared overnight. But piece by piece, he'd been replaced. Now, every time she walked into the office, Valentina was in the center of the room, running operations like she had always been part of the original blueprint. She had become more than an executive. She had become an influence. Board members emailed her directly. Partners requested her by name. Internally, she began referring to the company as we, as if she had been there since day one. The company's press page featured photos from recent campaigns. Valentina pictured front and center beside Dominic. No Serena. The company's leadership page was updated. Valentina's title had changed from director to chief brand officer. Serena hadn't signed off on that promotion. She hadn't even been informed. But she wasn't surprised. The game had shifted, and Serena was no longer interested in playing it. She stopped showing up at headquarters. She relocated her foundation's office across town, separating her work physically and emotionally from the company she once helped build. Her calendar filled quickly, with educators, community leaders, city officials, people who listened when she spoke, people who valued impact over headlines. She felt alive again, focused, clear. But no matter how much distance she created, reminders followed her home. Valentina's perfume lingered on Dominic's jackets. Her voice echoed in the background during his late-night calls. Once, Serena found one of Valentina's earrings under the passenger seat of their car. She didn't bring it up, not because she was weak, but because she was done handing out warnings that wouldn't be heard. Dominic had already made his choices. Now she had to make hers. She attended therapy privately, told no one, not even Iris. She journaled every morning, pages of thoughts, quiet pain, and goals that didn't involve saving a marriage. She kept track of her cycles quietly, and one morning, without expecting it, without treatment or intervention, she took a pregnancy test and saw 2 clear lines. This time, she didn't cry. She sat on the bathroom floor and whispered, "I don't need him to be whole." She waited 3 days before telling Dominic. He didn't say much. He hugged her, kissed her forehead, then left for work like any other day. There was no joy in his eyes, no plans for doctor visits, no late-night baby name ideas. just detachment. That was when Serena realized something permanent had shifted in her. She wasn't afraid of being alone anymore. She was afraid of being with someone who made her feel unseen. Dominic didn't notice the difference, but Valentina did. At a quarterly donor brunch hosted by the foundation, Valentina showed up uninvited. She said she was representing the company. Serena didn't confront her. She didn't raise her voice. She greeted her with a tight smile and seated her at the furthest table from the stage. Then, in her speech, Serena thanked every partner by name, except Reed Innovations. Later that afternoon, Valentina approached her near the exit. "You seem distant lately." Serena didn't blink. "I'm growing." Valentina's smile faded. "If you're trying to make things uncomfortable, I'm not trying," Serena interrupted. "This is who I am." Comfortable or not. Valentina opened her mouth to respond, but Serena was already walking away, back to her guests, back to her purpose, back to her life. Dominic Reed had always been sharp, focused, the kind of leader who could walk into a meeting half awake and still close a deal by lunch. But in the months following Serena's emotional withdrawal, something in him began to blur. He didn't realize it at first. He thought he was just tired. But the truth was this: without Serena's grounding presence, the company wasn't operating at its full strength. Ideas didn't hit the same. His vision felt clouded. He began showing up to meetings late, missing key data in presentations, delegating more and more to Valentina, not because she earned it, but because he didn't have the energy to care. Valentina, on the other hand, was energized. She was done playing coy. She had waited patiently for Dominic to end things with his wife, to claim her publicly, to commit. But he hadn't. And she was getting impatient. "What are we doing?" she asked one night in his penthouse office, sitting on the couch with her legs tucked under her. Dominic leaned against the wall, eyes heavy. "What do you mean? You still go home to her?" He didn't answer. "She's pregnant now, right?" Valentina continued. "And what? You're just going to stay in limbo while I sit here acting like we're not serious?" Dominic rubbed his temples. "It's not that simple." Valentina stood. "Yes, it is. Either she's your wife or I am. Make a decision." Her tone left no room for negotiation. Dominic didn't respond that night, but he started thinking, not about what was right, about optics. He knew his board wouldn't like the scandal. He knew investors valued Serena's presence, but he also knew the media had short memories, and people in power didn't get held accountable unless money was involved. Valentina sensed his hesitation and used it. She made herself more visible. She started showing up to investor mixers in red dresses, whispering in Dominic's ear in full view, laughing louder, touching his arm longer, posting subtle but unmistakable photos on social media, cocktails at his favorite lounge, snapshots of shoes beside his in hotel suites. The buzz started building. Gossip blogs took notice. Tech insiders began speculating, is Dominic Reed dating his brand officer? The press office at Reed Innovations released no statements. Serena said nothing. But inside the company, tension exploded. HR received anonymous complaints. Staffers requested private meetings with upper management. Long-term employees started resigning. Dominic didn't address it. He kept pretending he was in control, but he wasn't. He was following Valentina's lead more than he realized. And she wasn't slowing down. She wanted a title, a ring, a public role. She wanted to walk into the annual charity gala on his arm, not as a +1, but as the woman who had replaced Serena Reed. And she said so. "I want you to bring me to the gala." Dominic blinked. "What?" "You heard me," Valentina said. "Everyone will be there. It's time people know who I am to you. Serena's on the board. She chairs the event." "Exactly," Valentina said. "You've already left the marriage emotionally. The only thing missing is proof. Give it to them." He looked at her for a long moment. The thought of Serena, 6 months pregnant, standing in that ballroom she designed, watching him walk in with Valentina, should have stopped him. But it didn't. He nodded. "Fine." Valentina smiled, slow and confident. I'll find a dress that'll shut down the room. The distance wasn't just emotional anymore. It was physical. Dominic spent more nights away from home. Late meetings, he claimed. Client dinners, emergency conference calls. Serena stopped asking for details. The answers didn't matter anymore, because his eyes gave him away every time. She'd wake up in the middle of the night to an empty bed. Hours later, the front door would creak open. Sometimes he'd try to slide in beside her like nothing happened. Other times, he went straight to the guest room. There were no apologies, no explanations, just cold air between them where warmth used to live. She knew what he was doing. She didn't need proof. She felt it. The intimacy had vanished. Not just physically, but in the way he no longer noticed when she changed her hair, or how her hands trembled after long hormone treatments, or how she stopped wearing lipstick because he hadn't said you look beautiful in months. Serena found herself staring into the mirror longer than usual, not out of vanity, but confusion. Who was this woman with tired eyes and questions she was too exhausted to ask? Iris noticed. "You okay?" she asked one morning while they sorted through donor packets for the foundation. "I'm fine," Serena replied without looking up. Iris didn't press, but she didn't believe her. One afternoon, Serena sat alone in the waiting room of her OB-GYN's office. She had asked Dominic to come. He said he'd try. He didn't show. The nurse placed a hand on her shoulder after the checkup. "You're doing great. Baby's strong. But don't forget to take care of yourself too." Serena smiled politely. She got into her car, closed the door, and screamed into her hands. Back at home, she found a champagne cork on the kitchen floor. There had been no celebration, no anniversary, no guests, just an empty bottle in the trash, and 2 lipstick-stained glasses on the counter. That night, she packed a bag and drove to Iris's house. She stayed there for 2 days, not because she had a plan, but because she needed silence that wasn't filled with tension. When she came back, Dominic was in the kitchen, eating cereal like nothing had happened. He didn't ask where she went. She didn't offer it. Instead, she sat across from him and said, "I know about her." Dominic didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. He just looked at her blankly and said, "I didn't mean for things to get this far." The sentence dropped between them like a verdict. Serena nodded. But they did. The clinic lights were always too bright. Sterile. Clinical. Cold. Serena used to go with Dominic. Now she went alone. The receptionist greeted her with the same sympathetic smile. The nurse with the steady hands always asked, "How are we feeling today?" And Serena always gave the same answer. Tired, but hopeful. It was a lie. Hope had been slowly draining out of her for months. What remained was habit, going through the motions because stopping would mean accepting too much truth at once. She sat in the waiting room surrounded by couples. Hands held tight, nervous laughter, shared tension. She used to be one of them. Now she watched them from a distance. Dominic hadn't accompanied her to a single appointment this cycle. He'd sent a text on the morning of her retrieval. "Let me know how it goes." No phone call. No follow-up. It was the 3rd round they had tried since the last miscarriage. Her body ached more than ever. The hormone shots left bruises. Her emotions swung like a pendulum, steady one moment, crashing the next. At home, she had to inject herself in the bathroom mirror. She had once asked Dominic to help. He'd said, "I don't want to hurt you." But the silence, the absences, the neglect, those had already done damage she couldn't measure. One evening, after her trigger shot, Serena sat on the bathroom floor for 20 minutes, just breathing, not crying, just trying to feel like a person again. Iris offered to go with her to one of the ultrasounds. Serena said no, because no one could take his place, and she didn't want anyone to try. The clinic called 2 weeks later. "Your levels are rising. You're pregnant." She sat frozen with the phone pressed to her ear. Pregnant. After years of disappointment, the word felt unreal. She hung up, closed her eyes, and placed both hands over her belly. For a moment, she didn't think of Dominic. She thought of the tiny life inside her, the heartbeat she hadn't yet heard, the chance to start over, even if she was doing it alone. Later that evening, she told Dominic, He didn't react. No excitement, no emotion, no questions about the due date. Just a quiet nod. Then, "I'm glad." He turned back to his laptop before she could say anything else. She walked out of the room. Into the nursery she had started decorating during their first IVF cycle, when she still believed they'd celebrate every moment together. She stood in the center of the empty room and whispered to the child she hadn't met yet, "You're already loved." Even if he doesn't show it. The first time she packed her suitcase, it was late, almost midnight. Dominic had come home smelling like a hotel hallway, cologne that wasn't his, mixed with wine she hadn't poured. He hadn't spoken when he walked in, just kicked off his shoes and mumbled something about being tired. Serena stood at the top of the stairs watching him fumble for the remote. She didn't speak. She just turned, walked into their bedroom, and pulled her overnight bag from the closet. She folded clothes without shaking, picked out the prenatal vitamins, even packed the sonogram photo in the front sleeve. Her hands were steady, but her heart was breaking. She made it to the front door, then stopped. It wasn't fear that held her back. It was the child inside her. She hadn't carried this life for long, but already her instincts had shifted. Every choice had to be measured against one truth. Her child deserved peace, but also answers. If she left now, the story would be incomplete. So she turned around, unpacked everything, got into bed beside a man who didn't even notice she had almost walked out on him. Days passed. Another week. She thought about leaving again when she saw the receipts. Valentina's name was on a hotel spa bill, signed to the Reed Innovations corporate card. There was no denying it. Still, she said nothing. She scanned it into a folder on her private drive, not because she wanted revenge, but because she might need records one day. The third time she almost left was at the Gala committee meeting. While the volunteers discussed seating charts and lighting cues, Serena's phone buzzed. It was an email from one of the vendors. Valentina had rerouted part of the foundation's catering budget for branding opportunities. It wasn't legal, it wasn't authorized, and it wasn't hidden well. When Serena brought it to Dominic's attention that night, he barely reacted. "I'll talk to her." "You should have already," she replied. He didn't answer. She slept in the guest room that night. She placed her wedding ring on the nightstand and stared at it for hours. She remembered what it felt like when he proposed. No big gesture, no audience. Just him, in their old apartment, holding her hand with trembling fingers and saying, "I can't build this life without you." Now he was building without her, and pretending not to see it. She woke up early the next morning and opened her laptop, drafted a resignation letter from the foundation, typed it, edited it, read it 3 times, then deleted it. She wasn't ready to walk away from what she'd built. Even if he already had, Dominic had changed. Not gradually, not quietly. He had become a man obsessed with perception. His days were now packed with camera flashes, media profiles, and curated interviews where he spoke of innovation and impact, but never of family, never of Serena. Not once had he mentioned the foundation in his latest features, and certainly never his unborn child. He had become a brand, and Serena was no longer part of it. At home, he moved like a guest, quiet, calculated, distant. He spoke less, listened even less. When he did say something, it felt more like a press statement than a conversation. Once, during dinner, she asked him how his day went. He replied, "Productive, nothing more." She tried to tell him the baby kicked earlier that afternoon, that the moment made her cry, made her feel more alive than she had in months. He nodded, not even a smile. The man who once read neuroscience articles just to impress her couldn't look up from his phone long enough to ask how she felt carrying their child. The final strand snapped during a board review meeting. Serena had prepared detailed notes outlining new donor engagement strategies and updated transparency reports. When she presented, Dominic barely glanced at the slides. Valentina chimed in halfway through, offering a new direction that directly contradicted Serena's model. Dominic cut the discussion short. "We'll move with Valentina's approach for now." Serena didn't argue, not in public. But later, in private, she asked him plainly, "Why am I still here?" He didn't ask what she meant. He just said, "Because it's easier." She stared at him. Easier than what? Easier than explaining why everything fell apart. Those words didn't come from hate. They came from convenience. Serena realized then, Dominic wasn't afraid of losing her. He was afraid of being blamed. That night, she sat alone in the nursery. The walls were painted a soft grey, the crib already assembled, the nightlight glowing warm. She stared at the mobile above the crib, tiny stars slowly turning, hanging by threads. Like everything else in her life, she picked up a baby book she hadn't touched in weeks. Inside, she had written the letter every parent writes: hopes, promises, dreams for a child who hasn't yet opened their eyes. She flipped to the last page. It was blank. She took out a pen and wrote 5 quiet words. "You are enough without him." And for the first time in a long while, she believed it. The Foundation's annual charity gala was more than an event. It was Serena's legacy. Every year, she poured herself into it, securing sponsors, highlighting children's success stories, coordinating with school districts, curating moments that reminded powerful people why the work mattered. This year was no different. Except everything was different. She was 6 months pregnant, tired, alone in her marriage, yet determined to make the night about something bigger than herself. The team had nearly finalized the guest list when Iris knocked on Serena's door. "You should see this," she said, holding a forwarded email. Serena read it once, then twice. Valentina had submitted a +1 please reply, herself and Dominic. Serena stared at the screen. Iris waited. "Did you know about this?" "No," Serena said calmly, "but I'm not surprised." In another office across town, Valentina stood in front of Dominic in a fitted black sheath dress, lips painted red. "Take me," she said. "To what?" "The gala," Valentina replied, adjusting her bracelet. "I want you to bring me—" Dominic frowned. "You know Serena's running it. She's on the board." "Exactly. Time to make a choice." He rubbed his temples. "It's not that simple." Valentina stepped closer. "Actually, it is. You're already living like you've left her. This just makes it real." Dominic stared at her. Part of him hesitated, out of caution, not guilt. But Valentina knew how to press the right buttons. "This isn't about drama," she said softly. "It's about truth. You've moved on. Show the world." He didn't answer right away. But the next morning, Serena got the official update from the PR team. Dominic Reed would be arriving with a guest. The name had been confirmed. Valentina Cortez. No title, no context, just her name. Serena said nothing. She thanked the staff, reviewed the logistics, signed the press release. Then, quietly, she closed her office door and placed both hands over her belly. "It's going to be a long night," she whispered. "But we'll get through it." Dominic stood at the window of his penthouse office, arms crossed, watching the city glow beneath him. The gala was 1 week away, and for the first time in months, he felt unsure. Not about business, not about quarterly earnings, about walking into a room with Valentina on his arm while his pregnant wife hosted the night. He hadn't spoken to Serena directly since the please reply had gone out. He'd avoided the Foundation office, citing scheduling conflicts, meetings, deadlines, unexpected travel. But the truth was simpler. He didn't want to face her, because a part of him knew she still carried dignity he couldn't buy. And when that kind of strength stands in front of you, it exposes all your weakness. Valentina entered the office without knocking. She never knocked anymore. "I got confirmation from the designer," she said. "The dress is being flown in from Milan." Dominic didn't turn around. "You're still not sure," she said. He exhaled. "It's going to be a public mess." Valentina shrugged. "Not if you control the narrative." "She's still my wife," he said. "And I'm still the woman who's been by your side every day for the last 6 months." He finally turned to her. "You were never supposed to be more than temporary." Valentina's smile faded. "Is that what I am to you?" she asked. Dominic didn't answer. She walked closer, voice low. "I've given you everything. I've been patient. I've stayed silent. But I'm not a secret anymore, Dominic. I've earned my place. Have you? He asked, sharper than intended. Her face hardened. Don't insult me. I'm not, he replied. I'm just not sure this is the move. Valentina folded her arms. Then maybe you don't deserve me. He blinked. Maybe Serena's not the only one you'll lose, she added. It was a threat disguised as disappointment. He knew that tone well. He used to use it himself in boardrooms, when reminding someone how quickly a wrong move could cost them everything. Valentina stepped back, adjusting her earrings. Bring me to the gala, she said. Show the world you make bold decisions. Then she walked out, leaving the door open behind her. Dominic stood in silence. He reached for his phone, thumb hovering over Serena's name, but he didn't call. He slid the phone back into his pocket and stared out the window again. The city lights still blinked, but now they didn't comfort him. The ballroom at the Fairmont Hotel buzzed with activity. Crews adjusted lights, florists arranged centerpieces, and sound technicians tested microphones with crisp rehearsal lines. Screens around the room cycled through digital slides of children smiling beside donated laptops, the heartbeat of the Foundation's mission. Serena walked through it all slowly, clipboard in hand, heels clicking against polished marble. Her back ached. Her feet were swollen, but her spirit stood firm. This night had to be perfect, not for her reputation, not for Dominic, but for the children and schools depending on this year's donations. Every detail reflected months of planning. Every touch reminded guests that purpose, not prestige, brought them here. Iris approached, tablet in hand. Catering is on track. VIP seating confirmed. Security briefed. Serena nodded. And the press line? Dominic's guest will arrive separately, Iris said carefully. She's requested media coverage. Serena didn't flinch. Let them take the photos. They'll need something to remember when the truth comes out. Iris tilted her head. You sure you want to do this tonight? Serena glanced down at her belly. I don't want to, she said. But I need to. There was a strength in her voice that hadn't always been there. She handed Iris her clipboard. I'm going to sit for a moment. Don't worry. I'm not running. Iris smiled. I never worry about you running. I worry about everyone else keeping up. In a private lounge near the ballroom, Serena kicked off her heels and rubbed her calves. Her dress, custom tailored in deep emerald, hugged her bump gracefully. Her stylist had added a gold brooch that once belonged to her grandmother. Every piece of her look told a story. She hadn't dressed to impress. She dressed to reclaim her voice. Across town, Dominic stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his tie. He wore a classic black tuxedo, clean cut, no risks, no edge. Valentina emerged from the bedroom in a red satin gown that hugged her frame and shimmered under the chandelier. She looked stunning, but when she asked, "Do I take your breath away?" he hesitated too long before replying. They rode to the gala in silence. Photographers waited outside the hotel. Valentina stepped out first, striking her pose like she had practiced it. Chin lifted, eyes direct. Hand linked through Dominic's arm. Inside the ballroom, a hush spread. The CO founder's wife hadn't made her entrance yet, but his mistress had. Serena stood alone in the hallway outside the ballroom, steadying her breath. Through the closed doors, she could hear the soft hum of music, the clink of glasses, and scattered voices, most of them now murmuring over the scandal that had just walked through the entrance. She knew what they were whispering, knew that dress was red, knew she'd show up with him. How could he do this when his wife is pregnant? She looks so calm. Why isn't she reacting? Serena smoothed her gown and took one final look in the mirror. Her reflection didn't show a woman unraveling. It showed someone who had spent months rebuilding herself quietly, alone. While the man she loved slipped further into vanity and betrayal, she had learned how to survive her own silence, how to carry heartbreak without letting it stain everything else she touched. She took a deep breath and placed her hand gently on her belly. "You're going to see your mother tonight," she whispered. "Not the woman your father dismissed, not the wife he forgot. The woman who built this from nothing, who refused to shrink, In that moment, something shifted in her posture. She didn't just stand. She rose, with grace, with clarity, with fire no one could see until it burned in the room. She stepped into the ballroom like royalty. The effect was instant. Conversations froze. Cameras turned. People parted to make space, but no one dared approach. The crowd watched as she made her way to the center, where the program was about to begin. Dominic turned when he felt the shift in energy, and for the first time in a long while, he stared at Serena, not with obligation or frustration, but with awe. She looked radiant, not in a forced way, in the way truth shines through pain and refuses to hide. Valentina's grip on his arm tightened. Dominic blinked, swallowed, and looked away. Iris approached Serena gently. "Are you sure you're ready?" Serena nodded once. "I've been ready. I just had to remember it." She stepped toward the stage, every stride measured, every gaze on her. The spotlight hit. The music dimmed. And as she took the microphone, her voice was calm, unwavering. "Good evening," she began, scanning the room. "Thank you for joining us to support something that's always been greater than any single name in this room." The crowd fell into a reverent silence. Serena smiled faintly. "The cause we fight for doesn't care about titles, gossip, or the headlines tomorrow morning. It cares about children who need opportunity. It cares about schools that lack access. And it cares about integrity." A few people shifted in their seats. Valentina looked like stone. Dominic exhaled slowly. And Serena, without flinching, prepared to say the one thing that would flip the entire room. But first, she looked down at her bump, then back up at the crowd. Her voice held. "We don't hide from difficult truths." As Serena stepped away from the mic, the applause started slowly, uncertain at first, then it grew. Guests rose to their feet, not out of obligation, but because something about her presence demanded respect. Dominic clapped too, but his hands were stiff. Valentina didn't move. The room buzzed with uneasy energy. Dinner service began. Conversations resumed, but with hushed tones and glances toward the head table where Serena now sat, poised, with Iris at her side. Every so often, someone approached to offer a compliment, a handshake, a word of admiration. "She's the real force behind this. I never knew how strong she was until tonight. This is the Serena we've always needed to see." Dominic watched from across the room, his appetite gone. Valentina sipped wine slowly, carefully masking her growing irritation. "She played that well," she said under her breath. Dominic didn't respond. "She's making you look like the outsider," Valentina added, eyes narrowing. "Don't start," he muttered. She leaned closer. "You brought me here." Don't act shocked when she chooses the stage to fire back. Across the room, Serena smiled politely at a city official, but her mind was focused. Focused on what she was about to do. Focused on the moment she'd prepared for after weeks of silent investigation and hidden discoveries. Her hands were calm now, but earlier that afternoon, they had trembled when she signed the final set of documents, the ones confirming the Foundation's full legal action against the marketing contractor tied to Valentina's shell company. She hadn't just caught whispers. She had traced every payment, every wire transfer, every forged signature. The fraud wasn't hard to find. It had simply been buried under arrogance. Valentina hadn't even been careful. Serena had spent long nights comparing financial statements, tracing entities, and building the case piece by piece. She waited for this moment, not for revenge, for justice. And now, the entire board sat in the front row, aware of what was coming. Legal counsel waited at the back. Security had been briefed. At exactly 8:10 p.m., Serena walked back toward the stage. Dominic turned, his brow furrowed. "She's going back up." Valentina froze. Iris stepped forward and dimmed the lights again. Serena stood beneath the spotlight for the second time that evening. This time, there was no smile. "There's something else I need to say," she began, her voice steady, her eyes locked on Dominic. The room stilled. Every fork paused mid-air. Every breath held, and Serena said the words that would break the night open. "Tonight, while we celebrate the children we serve, I also have to protect them. Because someone in this room has stolen from them. Gasps. Chairs shifted. Valentina's wineglass trembled in her hand. Serena continued. Our foundation discovered fraudulent payments, overinflated marketing contracts, traced to an LLC linked to one of our own. She turned her head slowly. Met Valentina's eyes. Valentina Cortez. Gasps turned into chaos. Valentina stood abruptly. That's a lie. Serena raised her hand calmly. We filed charges. The board has unanimously agreed to cooperate with authorities. And tonight, in front of every donor, every child advocate, and every journalist in this room, we reclaim our integrity. Security approached. Valentina tried to move, but Iris stepped forward. You're not going anywhere. Serena turned toward Dominic. He looked pale, frozen, and she said the final words for him alone. I could have forgiven the affair. I would have even forgiven the humiliation. But I will never forgive letting children suffer for your ego. Dominic opened his mouth, but no words came. The only sound now was the flash of cameras, and the sound of everything he built collapsing. The room didn't breathe. Not when Serena spoke. Not when Valentina tried to lunge toward the exit. Not when security stepped in and intercepted her with swift, controlled force. Not when the press began snapping photos faster than they could blink. And certainly not when Serena stood center stage, unmoved, as the woman who disrupted her home was escorted out in front of tech leaders, donors, cameras and whispers that would circle the globe within hours. Dominic was still seated, still frozen, still watching his carefully managed world crumble into headlines he could no longer control. Across the room, Marcus Calloway, his oldest investor, leaned back in his chair with a grim expression. Serena had already spoken to him earlier that week, one-on-one, with spreadsheets, bank documents, and a prepared statement. He hadn't believed it at first. But facts don't need favor. They just need proof. And Serena brought all of it. Now, Marcus didn't flinch. He nodded, slowly. Respectfully, Serena had done what no one in Dominic's life had dared to, call out corruption at the top and burn it down with facts instead of fury. Back on stage, Serena took a moment. She didn't smile. She didn't grandstand. She simply let the silence do what it needed to. She looked down at her bump again, then looked up, and said clearly, let's get back to the real reason we're here. Building futures for children who deserve everything we never had. The applause was thunderous. It wasn't for revenge. It was for resilience. She stepped down slowly, Iris meeting her halfway, whispering, You didn't just survive tonight. You owned it. Serena exhaled. It had to be done. The rest of the night unfolded like a well-rehearsed shift in power. The donors rallied around her. The press followed her. The board met in the private lounge, unofficially signaling that Dominic's position at Reed Innovations was no longer secure. And Dominic? He stood by the bar, untouched, unspoken to. He watched people swarm Serena with admiration and relief. People who used to beg him for deals now shook her hand, like she was the one carrying the future of the company. And she was. Valentina's name was already trending online. And Gala scandal and Bayesian fraud, and Dominic Reed exposed. Security had handed over all evidence to the authorities before the night ended. The legal team would follow up in the morning, but the damage was already done. Serena gave one final interview before exiting. A young journalist from a women's leadership magazine asked, How did you stay so composed through it all? Serena looked directly into the lens. I stopped waiting for someone to protect my name, she said, and I started protecting it myself. Dominic didn't leave the gala. He couldn't, not yet. Not while every camera followed Serena. Not while whispers clung to him like smoke. Not while his legacy unraveled in real time. He stood near the back of the room, jaw locked, drink untouched. The ice had melted long ago, but he held the glass anyway, just to keep his hands from shaking. The press didn't come near him. No questions, no requests for statements, no cameras angled in his direction. They had already chosen the story, and he wasn't the lead anymore. He was the cautionary footnote. 1 hour ago he'd walked in confident, wearing a custom tuxedo, arm in arm with the woman he thought made him look powerful. Now she was in police custody. Now the entire foundation board had turned their backs on him. Now Serena had taken the stage and the entire room, with truth so clean it left no space for denial. He tried to make eye contact with Marcus Calloway across the ballroom. The older man didn't blink, didn't nod, didn't even acknowledge him, just folded his arms and turned his shoulder. Dominic turned away. He spotted Serena across the floor, surrounded by donors, colleagues, press, and people he once claimed as allies. She was glowing, not with revenge, but resolve. And he knew she had won. Not the petty kind of win, not the dramatic kind, but the kind of win you only earn when you take everything someone thought could break you and turn it into something bigger. He stepped out into the corridor to breathe. The hallway was empty, quiet, until Iris appeared. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. He braced himself, but she didn't yell. She just said, "How did it get this far?" He didn't answer. She shook her head. She would have forgiven the affair. "You know that, don't you?" Dominic closed his eyes. She would have forgiven everything, except stealing from the children. Her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed dry. "She trusted you," Iris added. "We all did." He whispered, "I didn't know about the money." She stared at him. "But you knew about the woman." That silence said more than a courtroom ever could. She left without another word. Back inside the ballroom, Serena was announcing a record-breaking donation total. Dominic could hear the applause through the walls. He used to be the one people clapped for. Now he couldn't even clap for himself. The flashing lights outside the Fairmont weren't just from photographers anymore. Red and blue pulses lit the edges of the building. 2 unmarked cruisers pulled into the valet lane, and officers in plain suits stepped out with quiet urgency. Inside, the ballroom buzzed with speculation. Are the police really here? Is this about her? Is it true she used fake companies to funnel funds? Serena remained composed. She didn't flinch when her phone vibrated. It was the signal. They had arrived. She stepped to the side of the ballroom with Iris as the crowd continued to celebrate. Donations were still pouring in. Guests toasted, not because of gossip, but because the mission of the foundation had remained intact, untouched, unstained. Serena had made sure of that. Back near the exit, Valentina sat alone in the private reception area, scrolling through her phone. Her public persona had already started to fracture. Group chats were buzzing, blogs were posting. Her photo had been screen captured by a dozen gossip outlets. She saw her name trending. She smirked. They always talk. She still believed she could spin it, until she looked up and saw 2 officers walking toward her. Her face fell. "Ms. Valentina Cortez?" She stood slowly. "What is this?" One of the officers remained calm. "You're being detained in connection to an ongoing investigation into corporate fraud, identity misrepresentation, and misappropriation of funds tied to Reed Innovations' charitable arm." "You're making a mistake," she snapped. "You don't know who I am." "We know exactly who you are," the second officer said. People started gathering near the edges of the corridor. Phones went up. Valentina's voice rose. "Dominic," she called out. "Tell them this isn't what it looks like." But Dominic didn't appear. He was still in the corridor, watching from a distance, silent, pale, and unwilling to help the woman who had become his ruin. "You set me up," she shouted. "You knew they were onto us." The officers didn't respond. They secured her wrists without drama. Click. The sound of metal was louder than any applause that night. Gasps filled the reception hall as Valentina was walked out, head held high at first, but crumbling with every flash, every step. Every camera turned her way. No photos. She barked at the crowd, but no one listened. The moment was too charged, too deserved, too real. As the front doors opened, Serena stood back, watching from across the lobby. Valentina's eyes locked with hers. Hatred, panic, regret, all mixed in one fleeting look. Serena didn't blink, didn't gloat. didn't smirk. She simply turned away. Because the lesson was already written. Valentina wasn't the storm. She was the test. And Serena had passed. The ballroom had nearly emptied. Guests left buzzing with stories. The press had more content than they ever expected. And Serena? She stood near the stage, staring at the framed photo of the foundation's very first recipient, a young girl who'd gone on to study computer engineering because someone believed in her. That photo reminded her why she fought so hard. Not for pride, not for vengeance, but for purpose. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn. Dominic cleared his throat. "Can we talk?" Serena didn't move. He stepped beside her slowly, hands in his pockets. For the first time in years, he looked small. Not physically, but in presence, in confidence. "I didn't know about the shell companies," he said quietly. "I swear." Serena spoke without looking at him. "You didn't ask questions either. I thought I could control it," he continued. "The image, the board, the narrative. But I couldn't." "You gave her access to our lives," Serena said. "Our company, our foundation. I thought I could separate everything. You and I, her and work. There is no such thing," she said. "When you compromise your values, everything bleeds." He turned to her fully. "I know you probably hate me." She finally looked at him. "No," she said, "I don't hate you." Relief flashed across his face, but it was short-lived. "I pity you." Dominic blinked. Serena stepped closer. Not out of warmth, out of clarity. "You had something real. Someone who loved you when all you had was an idea and a futon. Someone who carried your child while you carried someone else's lies. You didn't just cheat on me, Dominic. You abandoned yourself." His throat tightened. "I would have forgiven the affair," she said calmly. "But not what you allowed her to do to those kids. Not what you allowed yourself to become." She stepped back. "I don't need you to fall apart. I need you to reflect, to rebuild, without hiding behind your name." Dominic nodded, defeated. "Can I be in the child's life?" Serena studied him for a long moment. "Yes," she said, "but not as a husband, and not under false terms." He swallowed hard. "Thank you." She walked past him without another word. Not because she was angry, because she was finished. To everyone still listening, if you've ever been betrayed, humiliated, or overlooked but still chose dignity over destruction, this was for you. Tell us in the comments, what moment broke you? And what moment rebuilt you? If Serena's strength moved you, hit the like button right now. It helps this story reach someone who might need it. Share this video with someone who's walking away from something that no longer serves them. Subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories, because here, we don't just tell stories. We speak truth. The ballroom had quieted again. The scandal had passed through like a storm, leaving the air thick with tension, awe, and unfinished emotions. But Serena wasn't done. Not yet. Her team had expected her to leave early, rest, recover, decompress after everything she had just orchestrated. But Serena stayed, not because she needed the spotlight, because she still had something to say. As the string quartet played softly in the background and guests began gathering their things, Serena signaled to the event staff. The microphone was turned back on. A soft tone rang through the ballroom once more. And then, her voice. "Before we close this evening," she said, "there's one more thing I need to say, not as a board member, not as a founder, but as a woman who nearly lost herself." Everyone froze again. Those standing sat back down. Those near the door stepped away from it. Dominic, still in the corner, turned toward the stage, his face unreadable. Serena stood tall, the light catching the gold detailing of her gown. She looked like someone who had walked through fire and refused to come out anything less than whole. "You all know what happened tonight," she said. "You saw the arrest, you heard the truth, but what you didn't see, what many of you never asked to see, was the cost of silence." The room didn't move. "For months, I worked beside a man who once promised me forever. I gave up a career to help build a vision. I carried our child while he carried someone else's lies. And even then, I still hoped he'd remember who he was." Gasps flickered through the rows. I'm not telling you this for sympathy, she continued. I'm telling you because too many women shrink to preserve the peace. Too many build quietly while someone else steals loudly. And too many are told to take the high road, even when that road is paved with disrespect. There were no whispers now, only stillness. I almost walked away silently, she said. I almost let her have the spotlight. I almost let him keep his image. But then I thought about my child, the one growing inside me. And I realized my silence wouldn't protect her. It would teach her to accept what should never be normal. She placed a hand on her belly again. Not for theatrics, for grounding. And so I chose truth. A few audience members teared up quietly. Serena's voice remained strong. I didn't call the press. I didn't write an expose. I followed the trail, gathered the facts, and trusted that when the moment came, people would listen. She paused. You did, and I thank you for that. The audience slowly began to clap, lightly at first, then louder. She raised her hand gently, signaling for them to hold. One final thing, she said. Don't just applaud me. Applaud every woman who's ever rebuilt herself without anyone clapping for her. The room stood. The ovation was full, not out of politeness, but out of recognition. Serena stepped away from the mic and exited the stage, not looking back, because there was no longer anything behind her worth returning to. Once Serena stepped down from the stage, the ballroom remained in stunned silence, followed by another slow-building applause that swelled across the room. But this wasn't the empty clapping of social obligation. It was the sound of respect, of reckoning, of people realizing they had misjudged everything. At the edge of the crowd, Iris Zhang watched with tears in her eyes. She wasn't just Serena's friend, she was the foundation's director, and she had seen firsthand how much Serena had sacrificed to keep it alive. She quickly made her way toward her. Serena, she said, her voice hushed but urgent. They want to speak with you. Serena looked up, surprised. The board? She asked. Iris nodded. And the top 5 donors? Serena's stomach tightened, but she straightened her back. Moments later, in a private conference room off the ballroom, she stood before a semicircle of the most powerful names tied to the foundation. Marcus, Calloway among them, plus 3 Fortune 500 executives, a senator's spouse, and 2 former tech CEOs who'd turned full-time philanthropists. Each of them had sat through her entire speech. Each of them had seen the collapse of Dominic's carefully curated reputation. Now they were looking at her with something that had long been absent in those rooms, genuine respect. Marcus was the first to speak. I want to start by saying, thank you. Serena blinked. For what? For protecting this foundation, he replied. You didn't just save its integrity, you saved its future. Another board member chimed in. We read the documents you sent. We couldn't believe it at first, but once the forensic accountant confirmed the trail, there was no denying it. What you did, exposing that kind of internal theft, took courage. And class, added one of the donors. You could have gone to the media first. You didn't. You trusted us to handle it like adults. Serena exhaled slowly. I wasn't sure you would. Marcus gave a small smile. Frankly, neither were we. But you reminded us of the foundation's core. You reminded us why we started it in the first place. The senator's wife leaned forward. Serena, if you're willing, we'd like to formally offer you full executive authority over the foundation's operations. Serena froze. What about Dominic's seat? He's lost it, Marcus said firmly. By board vote, effective immediately. He's no longer a trustee, no longer an advisor. He's been removed from all decision-making. And what about the tech company? Serena asked. Marcus looked at her closely. We don't control that part. But let me put it this way. Reed Innovations has multiple government contracts. Public image matters. His shareholders will not be pleased, another donor added. There are already calls for a special board meeting Monday morning. If I had to guess, Dominic's CEO days are over. Serena didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded. You all trusted him because he was loud, visible, and profitable, she said. I hope from now on, you'll also value those who build in silence. Marcus nodded. We will. Starting with you. Another donor stood up and extended her hand. Whatever you need to rebuild this foundation's reputation and your own, we're behind you. Serena shook her hand, her mind already racing toward the future. She had fought for this. Now she would lead, not as a woman behind the throne, but as the one sitting in it. As the board meeting concluded, Iris returned to her side. Serena, you okay? I will be, Serena said. For the first time in a long while, I feel seen. As Serena exited the boardroom, a wave of applause echoed faintly from the ballroom behind her. But she barely noticed it. Her mind was focused on what came next. Justice, not revenge. At the venue's main entrance, Valentina Cortez was surrounded by security and 2 uniformed officers. Her red gown, which earlier shimmered under the gala lights, now looked garish under the harsh glow of reality. Her smile had long since faded. She looked around desperately, searching for someone, anyone, to rescue her. Dominic stood several feet away, eyes wide, heart pounding. He watched as the woman he had risked everything for was about to be led away in handcuffs. "This is a mistake," Valentina shouted. "You don't know who I am." One of the officers calmly replied, "Ma'am, we have a warrant for your arrest. Embezzlement, fraud, and wire theft. You have the right to remain silent." Valentina cut him off, spinning toward Dominic. "You set me up," she screamed. "You told me you had it under control. You said no one would find out." Dominic raised his hands instinctively. "I didn't know she was investigating anything. I swear." "Liar," she spat. "I should have known. You were always too weak to handle real power." The officers didn't wait. They cuffed her as the photographers snapped away. Her wrists gleamed not with diamonds now, but with steel. Valentina turned one last time to Dominic. "You're going down too. You signed every contract, every approval. You were the face, baby, not me." With that, she was led out the doors into a waiting squad car. The media swarmed. It was already a circus. Dominic stood frozen in place. For the first time, truly alone. His world had collapsed in less than 2 hours. Back inside, whispers grew louder. Board members made calls. Investors quietly updated portfolios. The Reed name, once gold in the valley, now carried scandal. Later that night, in his penthouse, Dominic collapsed into the leather chair by the window. The view of the city did nothing for him now. He had brought this on himself. His phone buzzed. "Marcus," he answered without thinking. "Dominic," the older man said plainly, "you'll be getting a formal notice in the morning. The board voted tonight. You're being removed as CEO." Dominic closed his eyes. "We had to do it," Marcus continued. "You let a thief into your inner circle. Whether you were involved or not, the trust is gone. This isn't personal, it's business." Dominic barely nodded. "Understood. You had a good woman," Marcus added, "and you let her walk into that ballroom alone while you paraded your affair around like it was a power move." There was a long pause. "She buried you without raising her voice," Marcus said. "Think about that." Click. The line went dead. Dominic sat still for a long time, surrounded by silence. The same silence Serena had likely endured for years. Only now did he understand what it meant. Loss didn't always come with fire or fury. Sometimes it came wrapped in the cold truth. He had lost Serena. He had lost his name. And now he would lose everything else. The ballroom at the Fairmont Hotel began to clear slowly, guests whispering among themselves, eyes wide with disbelief. The once lavish gala now felt like the scene of a reckoning. But Serena remained composed. She didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She simply returned to her table, where Iris waited with glassy eyes and trembling hands. "You okay?" Iris asked. Serena nodded, though she looked exhausted. "I'm fine. No one's ever done what you just did," Iris whispered. "Not like that. Not with that much grace." Serena looked toward the stage where the microphones still stood, silent now. "I didn't want to. I had no choice." The DJ, unsure of what to do, started playing soft classical music. The catering staff resumed their duties. Life moved on around them, but but everyone knew something had shifted permanently. Within an hour, several donors approached Serena privately. Some offered support. Some apologized for not seeing what was happening. A few promised even greater commitments to the foundation now that the truth was out. "I didn't do this for recognition," Serena told one couple. "I did it because children were being robbed of their futures, and because I needed to show my daughter who I am." The woman touched Serena's arm gently. "You already have." That night, Serena didn't go back to the mansion. She returned to her apartment, the one she had secretly leased months earlier, anticipating this moment. It was small, quiet, and hers. She sat at her kitchen table, unzipped the back of her gown, and rested her hands on her belly. "We did it," she whispered. Her phone buzzed with messages, some from friends, others from strangers. But one message stood out, from Marcus Calloway. "Tonight, you didn't just protect the foundation. You reminded us all what integrity looks like. The board stands with you, and whatever you choose to do next, I'll back it." Serena responded with a simple thank you. She didn't need anything more. 2 days later, the fallout from the gala was swift. Valentina's arrest led to a public investigation. News outlets ran with headlines like, "Marketing exec arrested at charity gala for embezzlement, tech CEO linked to foundation scandal." Though Dominic was not criminally charged, the court of public opinion was unforgiving. His board ousted him. Investors withdrew. Shares plummeted. Serena, however, received a different kind of attention. The foundation's donations doubled within 72 hours. Prominent figures praised her courage and leadership. She declined every interview, every invitation to speak. Instead, she issued a short statement. "This foundation is not about me. It's about the children we serve. I will continue working quietly to ensure they receive every opportunity they deserve." Her statement went viral. People respected her restraint. No theatrics, no fame-seeking, just integrity. Back at the Fairmont, the ballroom was being cleared of decorations. Iris walked Serena through the empty space where it had all happened. "You realize you changed everything, right?" Iris said. Serena exhaled slowly. "I didn't want to be strong that way, but I had no choice." "I think that's what made it powerful." They stood in silence. Then Serena whispered, "I loved him. I really did." Iris didn't speak. "And I wanted our baby to have both parents," Serena continued. "But maybe that dream had to die for something truer to grow." She rubbed her belly softly. "I'm not broken," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "I'm just done pretending." Iris gave her a nod. "You're not done. You're just beginning." That night, as Serena watched the sun rise from her apartment window, she sipped tea and held her stomach close. "Little one," she whispered, "your mama didn't just survive. She made sure no one else gets taken advantage of again. It wasn't revenge. It was principle. It was legacy. It was healing. And Serena had earned every bit of it." Dominic Reed had once started his days with high-level meetings, fresh-pressed suits, and private car service. This morning, he woke up alone. Not in his penthouse, not in his private suite, but in the guest bedroom of a friend's spare apartment, a place he never thought he'd need. He hadn't slept much. The images from the gala haunted him, the way Serena looked when she took the stage, the silence that fell over the room, Valentina screaming as she was escorted out, the crowd watching him like a man they didn't recognize. He didn't even recognize himself. He sat up slowly, still wearing the wrinkled tuxedo shirt from 2 nights ago, buttons halfway undone. His watch lay face down on the floor. He hadn't checked the time in hours. For years, Dominic had measured life in deals closed, contracts signed, markets conquered. But today, there was nothing to conquer. No schedule, no status, no wife. Just shame. He moved to the kitchen and opened the fridge. Empty, except for half a bottle of water. He drank it standing up, looking out the window. The view was ordinary. No skyline, no ocean, just rows of apartment blocks and parked cars. For the first time in years, he didn't feel important. He felt small. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a CEO. He felt like a man who'd betrayed the one person who had truly believed in him. He turned on his phone. Missed calls, news alerts, texts, one from his legal team. Board voted unanimously, step down effective immediately. Another from Marcus Calloway. You need to take responsibility. You let her in. You let it happen. And then, nothing from Serena. Not a message, not a warning, not even a reprimand. She was done with him. Dominic stared at her contact name in his phone for 10 minutes. He typed, erased, and retyped the same message. I'm sorry. He never hit send. What could he possibly say? He had thought Serena would cry, plead, maybe even rage at him. Instead, she stood tall and exposed a crime in front of hundreds. That strength shook him more than any scandal. Dominic hadn't just lost his company. He'd lost his moral center. He sat down, opened his laptop, and typed in Serena's name. Dozens of articles appeared. Her speech quoted, her leadership praised, donations to the foundation rising. But none of the articles captured the look in her eyes, the heartbreak wrapped in steel, the finality. She had carried his child, carried their dreams, and when he abandoned both, she chose to stand up rather than fall apart. He remembered the first time they met at Stanford. Serena in a lab coat, scribbling equations on a whiteboard. He, the computer science guy with bold ideas and even bolder charm. She had challenged him. She had grounded him. She had loved him without expectation, but over the years he had drifted. One missed date, one ignored birthday, one lie after another, until he was living two lives, one public and one filled with secrets. Now both were gone. Dominic walked past his old office building, now guarded by unfamiliar security. His name had been removed from the executive suite. Rumors swirled about potential replacements. Reed Innovations would move on. But could he? He stopped at the edge of a small park and sat on a bench. Across the street, families played. Children ran through sprinklers, laughing. A man helped his pregnant wife to her feet from a picnic blanket. Dominic watched silently. That should have been his life. He pulled out a small photo from his wallet, one of Serena and him from 5 years ago, taken at the same gala. They were smiling then, united. Now, it felt like another lifetime. He had given up Serena for a fantasy. Valentina had never loved him. She loved power, access, and the image he provided. But Serena had loved the man, not the money. And he had thrown her away. He didn't just lose his wife. He lost the version of himself that she had believed in. As the sun set and the sky turned amber, Dominic whispered to no one, I don't want this to be the end. But it was, for now. Because some wounds don't heal with apologies. Some bridges, once burned, don't get rebuilt with regret. Still, he would show up. He would be there for the child they created. And maybe, if he earned it, he'd someday become a man worthy of Serena's forgiveness. But for now, he had to sit in the ashes of his choices. Alone. The morning after the gala felt like waking up after a tornado. Only the wreckage wasn't scattered across the city, but inside Dominic Reed's chest. The echo of Serena's speech still rang in his ears. The way the room had fallen completely still, how Valentina's expression twisted from smug delight to raw panic. Dominic had stood there, helpless, as his wife burned everything to the ground, with poise, strength, and precision. He didn't sleep that night, didn't even leave the gala early. After Valentina was taken into custody and the guests slowly filtered out in silence, he stayed behind. Alone. He wandered the ballroom like a man who no longer recognized the walls around him. He didn't belong here anymore. The empire he built now felt like it belonged to someone else. He arrived home to a house that felt twice its size. The silence was louder than ever. He didn't even take off his shoes. He poured himself a glass of scotch and sat on the edge of his designer couch, staring at nothing for hours. The guilt, the shame, the deep regret, it had finally caught up to him. The media was ruthless. By morning, headlines plastered every major business outlet. CEO embarrassed at gala by pregnant wife's mic drop moment, Reed. Innovation Board in turmoil after public embezzlement scandal, and worst of all, from power couple to scandal. Dominic and Serena Reid implode. Valentina's mugshot circulated alongside photos of her in the red gown from the night before. Her crimes were now public knowledge. The money trail was undeniable. What was once speculation turned into fact. She had siphoned nearly $2 million through fake marketing contracts. And the fact that she had done it through Dominic's company made it worse. The board didn't wait long. By the end of that week, Dominic received an email requesting an emergency executive meeting. It wasn't a surprise. He attended via video call, too ashamed to show his face in the building. Marcus Calloway was the first to speak. "Dominic, you're our founder. No one disputes your vision, your early sacrifices, or your brilliance. But your judgment in the last year has placed this company at risk." Dominic nodded. He didn't fight it. He couldn't. "We're asking you to step down. Immediately. No deliberation, no bargaining. Just the end." He stared at the screen for a long time. "I understand." He signed the papers the next day. His exit was quiet, as requested. They didn't want another scandal. They gave him a generous severance package and retained him as an advisor for optics. But everyone knew the truth. Dominic Reid was no longer in control of Reid Innovations. His name would stay on the building, but not in the meetings, not in the future. He disappeared from the public eye, sold the penthouse in the city, moved back into their old house, the one Serena and he bought before his rise to tech fame, the one with the tiny backyard and creaky kitchen cabinets. He didn't want luxury anymore. He wanted to feel something real. He spent his days in silence, watching the stock market out of habit, reading the news and flinching whenever his name came up. No one visited, no one called, not even Valentina, who was still waiting trial. Her legal team tried to contact him, hoping he'd testify in her favor or deny involvement. He declined. He knew where he stood in all of this. He had enabled her. He hadn't looked close enough, and the price of that ignorance had cost him everything. He thought about Serena constantly, not just the night of the gala, but all the years before, the long nights in their apartment when he was building the company and she was still working in the lab, the peanut butter sandwiches they used to eat at 1 a.m., her voice reading scientific journals while he wrote code, her hand rubbing his back when his pitches were rejected, her tears when their third fertility treatment failed, her laughter when she felt the baby kick for the first time. All of it haunted him now. He remembered what she said at the gala, that she would have forgiven the affair, but not the betrayal against children. That line stuck with him. It reminded him of who she was and how far he had drifted. Weeks passed. He received a message from Serena's attorney. She had filed for divorce. Quietly. No media attention. No public drama. He didn't fight it. He signed. He was no longer her husband. The only thing he asked through his attorney was for permission to be present at the birth of their child. Serena didn't respond immediately. He waited. 1 month later, a simple email came through. "If you show up, come as the man our daughter can one day respect, not the one who threw us away." Dominic read that line a dozen times. He spent the next month preparing, not for the baby, but for himself. He started therapy, attended sessions 3 times a week, talked about his childhood, his obsession with success, the way his father left when he was 10, the need to prove he was worth something, how he built everything around achievement and forgot about relationships, how he equated love with loyalty but never gave Serena the same. Therapy peeled him open. He apologized to his staff, personally, those who had been let go unfairly, those he snapped at, those who warned him about Valentina. He reached out to non-profit board members, donated half his severance to rebuild the programs affected by the fraud, volunteered anonymously. He showed up to court for Valentina's hearing, sat in the back, didn't say a word. Her lawyers glared at him. She cried during sentencing, but never looked at him. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Serena went into labor. He sat quietly in the waiting room. Iris was there. She didn't smile when she saw him, just gave a firm nod. Hours passed. Finally, a nurse walked out. "You're the father." He stood. "Yes." She said, "You can come in." But only for a minute. He entered quietly. Serena looked exhausted but radiant. A small bundle lay in her arms. He approached slowly. "May I?" She nodded, wordless. He looked down at the child, his daughter, a full head of dark curls, tiny fists, breathing steady. Tears filled his eyes. "She's perfect." Serena watched him. "Her name is Alea." He smiled through tears. "Alea Reed." "No," she said gently. "Alia Morgan. My maiden name." He nodded, took it in. "Thank you," he whispered, "for letting me see her." Serena didn't respond. She didn't need to. He leaned down, kissed Alea's forehead, and stepped back. As he turned to leave, Serena spoke again. "If you want to be in her life, you have to earn it. You don't get to show up when it's easy." He nodded once more. "I know. I'll earn it, every day." He left the room, heart heavier than ever, but for the first time in years, it beat with purpose. He didn't know what the future held. He didn't expect forgiveness, but he hoped, quietly, deeply, that redemption started not with grand gestures, but with quiet consistency, with choosing better each day, with being the kind of father Alea could one day be proud of. That was the only legacy worth fighting for now. Dominic Reed woke up to silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that creeps into your bones when your phone stops buzzing, when your name vanishes from the headlines, not in triumph but in scandal. The mansion that once pulsed with purpose and ambition now stood still. Valentina's perfume had faded from the master bedroom. The security gates no longer open to photographers. Dominic was no longer the man who inspired awe. He was the cautionary tale no one wanted to repeat. The fallout from the gala came faster than he expected. Serena's announcement hadn't just destroyed Valentina's illusion of power. It dismantled Dominic's entire reputation. Valentina's arrest was all over the media, and her confession spilled more than just her involvement. She claimed Dominic approved the fraudulent contracts. He hadn't. Not directly. But his signature, his access, his blind trust, all of it was enough for the board to question his role. The board of Reed Innovations called an emergency session 2 days after the gala. Dominic tried to prepare. He called in his legal team, tried to draft a statement of regret, tried to spin it as an oversight. But nothing prepared him for the eyes that met him in that sterile boardroom. Cold, disappointed, tired of excuses. Marcus Calloway, the mentor who once believed in his potential, chaired the meeting. "Dominic," he began, his voice measured, "you didn't just let your marriage crumble. You let your judgment slip. You gave someone unvetted access to company resources. You endorsed those contracts." "I didn't know." "You should have," Marcus interrupted, firm. "You built this company on innovation, on excellence, on ethics. Somewhere along the way, you started believing your name alone could carry you. It can't. When the vote came, it wasn't close. 12-2. Dominic was out. Effective immediately. Stripped of CEO title. Severed from all decision-making powers. He would remain a shareholder, silent, uninvolved, irrelevant. His phone stopped ringing. The speaking invitations stopped. The board members who once toasted him with aged scotch avoided his gaze in public. Dominic Reed had become the man no one wanted to associate with. He returned home that night to a cold dinner and a colder bed. No Valentina, no Serena, no child's laughter echoing down the hallway, only silence and echoes of what once was. For days, Dominic wandered through the mansion like a man exiled from his own life. He found Serena's old journals stacked in her library wing, pages filled with gratitude, grief, and goals. He saw sketches for the foundation she dreamed of long before they had the money to fund it. He remembered her hands tracing out plans late into the night. She had always been building a legacy. He, somewhere along the line, had simply been chasing one. He read about her losses, miscarriages, emotional isolation, the fear that he'd outgrow her. It wasn't rage or resentment she had written down. It was heartbreak. Her pain had never come from his success. It came from his absence. The worst part wasn't losing his job. It wasn't the press calling him incompetent or the shareholders distancing themselves. It was the realization that he hadn't just hurt Serena. He had disrespected the version of himself she had once loved. Dominic drove by the foundation office one rainy afternoon. He didn't go in. He sat across the street, watching Serena exit the building, her hand resting gently on her stomach. She looked tired but whole, strong in a way he had forgotten women could be, not broken, not defeated, empowered. He thought about approaching her, telling her that he knew now, that he was ashamed, but the words felt too empty, not after what he had done. Weeks passed, then a month, then another. The baby's due date approached. Dominic received updates only from news articles and company press releases. Serena had cut off contact, except through legal intermediaries. Her silence said more than any confrontation ever could. One day, a package arrived at his doorstep. No note, just a hardcover copy of the Foundation's annual report. Serena was on the cover, holding a laptop with a smiling child beside her. The caption read, "Building Futures with Integrity." He flipped through the pages until he reached the donor acknowledgements. At the bottom of the page was a single line, dedicated to every woman who has ever stood alone and decided her future would not be dictated by betrayal. It hit him like a punch. Dominic started therapy, not to win her back, not to perform repentance, but because he needed to understand how he had become this man. The sessions were brutal, unearthing childhood insecurities, confronting his obsession with legacy, admitting how easily he had been seduced by power and vanity, how quickly he had discarded the woman who built him for the one who used him. Valentina's trial moved forward. Her attorneys tried to negotiate a lighter sentence by shifting more blame toward Dominic. But the financial records told a clearer story. She had masterminded the scheme. Dominic's sin was ignorance and arrogance, not fraud. Still, the stain remained. During one of his lowest nights, Dominic sat alone in his home theater, scrolling through photos on a forgotten USB drive. College pictures, Serena in a lab coat, laughing, the two of them building the first prototype of his now-defunct AI app, her notes on neural architecture that had inspired the breakthrough algorithm he built his empire on. She had given him her brilliance, her belief, her body, and her best years. And he had exchanged all of that for temporary validation from a woman who couldn't even spell half the words in Serena's doctoral thesis. The shame was endless. 2 weeks later, Dominic received a message through his attorney. Serena had given birth to a baby girl, healthy, 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Her name was Elara. He sat with that name for hours, whispering it into the quiet mansion, wondering how it would sound if said with affection or heard through the crackle of a baby monitor. He didn't deserve access. He didn't expect visitation. But he wrote a letter, not an apology, just a truth. Serena, I don't expect a response. I only ask that you read this. Our daughter has your strength. I know it, and I hope that someday she'll grow up knowing the full story, not just of my failure, but of your triumph. If there's any way I can support her from a distance, with no intrusion, I would be honored. I understand if silence is the answer. Thank you for giving her life. Dominic. He mailed it. No follow-up, no pressure, just a gesture. He didn't know if Serena would ever forgive him. He didn't know if Elara would ever call him Dad. But for the first time in years, Dominic Reed wasn't chasing anything. Not headlines, not applause, not a trophy partner. He was simply trying to become someone worth knowing again. The world had seen his fall. But what mattered now was what he did with the pieces. And for the first time, Dominic was finally ready to rebuild, not an empire, but a soul. Serena stood at the large window of Elara's nursery, watching the golden rays of morning dance over the treetops. The room smelled of baby lotion and lavender, a calming contrast to the chaos outside those walls. The past year had brought everything: humiliation, betrayal, childbirth, and an unexpected sense of peace. Holding her daughter against her chest, Serena found strength she never imagined she would need, or have. Elara stirred lightly, her small hands brushing against her mother's collarbone. Serena kissed her forehead, adjusting the blanket wrapped snugly around her. She'd named her daughter after the star, bright, distinct, and impossible to ignore. A name not tied to Dominic, a name that belonged only to her and this new chapter of life. Since the gala, Serena had poured her focus into her foundation and her daughter. Every day brought new responsibilities, new opportunities, and new meaning. She refused to allow her heartbreak to define her. Instead, it had sharpened her purpose. Every time she opened the doors to the education and wellness center her foundation built in North Oakland, she remembered the woman she used to be, the woman who waited in shadows, who settled, who compromised. That woman no longer existed, but as much as she tried to leave the past behind, the ghost of Dominic lingered, not as a threat, as a question. The board at Reed Innovations had reached out with multiple offers, first privately, then publicly. The company had lost nearly a third of its value after Dominic's ousting and Valentina's trial. Investors were losing faith. Clients were shifting contracts elsewhere. The company needed credibility, transparency, leadership. They needed Serena. MS Reed. One email read, "Your experience, vision, and moral clarity are the exact antidote to restore public trust in this brand. We'd like to offer you the position of interim CEO." Serena ignored the first few messages. She had no interest in cleaning up Dominic's mess. But the idea kept returning. Every time she walked past her daughter's crib, every time she remembered what was stolen from her, not just her marriage, but the respect she once commanded in her field, the credibility she'd surrendered. Late one night, she called her brother Emmanuel, an attorney who had guided her through much of the foundation's legal structure. "You're not still thinking about it, are you?" he asked bluntly. "I'm considering it." "You don't owe them redemption, Serena, especially not him." "It's not about him," she replied quietly. "It's about me, about what I want Elara to see when she grows up. She'll see a mother who built a foundation from nothing. Isn't that enough? Maybe. But what if I could build more, with control, with leverage, with purpose? What if the company that hurt me became the platform that elevates others?" There was a pause. Emmanuel sighed. "Then make sure the contract gives you full authority, no conditions, no strings. You lead it your way or not at all." Serena hung up with her decision solidifying. The following morning, she met with the board in person. Her presence shifted the energy the moment she entered the room, head high, eyes forward, Elara's initials engraved on the pendant around her neck. She didn't speak first. She waited. Let the discomfort simmer. Then finally, she leaned forward. "If I return, it's on my terms. Full autonomy. No Dominic, no advisory overlap. I want the power to restructure from the ground up, and I want 10% equity reallocated to support minority and women-led startups." One of the board members cleared his throat. "That's a sizable demand." "So is the one you're making," she said without flinching. "You want me to clean up a mess that was never mine to begin with. You want the public to believe you've changed. Then prove it." They went into closed discussion. Serena stepped outside, heart pounding but face calm. She wasn't afraid of rejection. She'd already lost everything before and survived. When they called her back in, Marcus Calloway stood. "Welcome home, Ms. Reed. The company is yours to lead." The news broke within hours. Headlines buzzed. "Scorned wife returns to lead husband's former company." The public didn't know the half of it, and they didn't need to. Dominic read the headline alone. He stared at the photo of Serena at the press conference, holding Elara on her hip, her smile poised and confident. She didn't mention him once, not even to take a jab. That silence cut deeper than any insult. It was confirmation that she had moved beyond him. And yet, he felt something unexpected. Pride. He knew her rise wasn't about revenge. It wasn't an act of ego. It was a declaration of identity. Serena had always belonged in that seat, in that spotlight. He'd simply failed to recognize it when it mattered most. He didn't try to contact her. Not this time. No letters. No messengers. But he began donating anonymously to the Foundation's health initiatives, funding scholarships under the alias R. Elara, a nod to the daughter he hadn't held, but whose name meant everything to him. Serena noticed the donations. She never acknowledged them publicly, but she tracked the impact they created. Every clinic funded, every scholarship awarded. They were helping people. Quietly. Consistently. Her assistant once asked, "Should I find out who our Ilara is?" "No," Serena said. "Some things don't need to be known. Only felt." Weeks passed. Then months. Serena thrived. Her leadership transformed Reed Innovations into a hub of equity-driven technology, integrating AI with education and healthcare in underserved communities. Her foundation and company collaborated on global impact projects. Her daughter grew, cooing in her crib, learning her mother's strength by example. One afternoon, Serena returned home from a long strategy session. As she entered Ilara's nursery, she found her daughter laughing at nothing, just kicking in joy, as if the world itself amused her. Serena picked her up, held her close. "You will never be someone's collateral. You are the prize, the purpose, the future." And in that moment, she realized she had made the right choice. Not because she returned to power, but because she rewrote the story, not as a victim, as the author. The decision wasn't about Dominic. It was about legacy, her daughter's and her own. And this time, it would be built on her terms. The rain came down in sheets the day Valentina Cortez stood trial. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted over one another, umbrellas battling wind as camera flashes lit up the grey sky. Inside, it was even tenser. The room felt packed with ghosts of betrayal, stolen money, broken marriages, and the kind of arrogance that expected to walk away unscathed. But not this time. Valentina sat at the defense table in a tailored navy suit, her jaw clenched, her cheekbones sharp. The glamour she once flaunted on Dominic's arm had faded. No more designer gowns or smug smirks. She wasn't the woman who once paraded Serena's pain through corporate galas and tech launches. She was a defendant, and her world was about to collapse. The prosecution laid out the facts with brutal clarity: embezzlement, insider trading, wire fraud, misuse of investor funds. Each charge was tied to evidence, not hearsay. Proof: emails, bank transfers, encrypted messages, meetings that took place under the illusion of business development but were cover for laundering millions. Dominic sat behind the prosecutor's table, not as a co-defendant but as a cooperating witness. His immunity deal came at a high cost: full transparency. He had to testify against Valentina, against himself, and against the very machine they had built together. He looked hollow, 10 pounds lighter, hair unkempt, eyes sunken. But there was no denying his presence mattered. His words carried weight, and his silence, when it came to personal motivations, screamed even louder. "I was complicit," he said on the stand. "I didn't stop it. I didn't ask the right questions. I benefited. And I betrayed people who trusted me." His voice cracked only once. When asked about Serena, she gave everything. "I gave her my ego in return." Valentina didn't look at him once during his testimony. Her hands stayed folded tightly on her lap. The defense tried to paint her as a scapegoat, a woman manipulated by a powerful man. But the evidence didn't support that version. In fact, it suggested the opposite. Valentina orchestrated the financial schemes. Dominic was guilty of enabling her, but she had built the system that broke the law. The jury took less than 3 hours to deliberate. "Guilty," the foreman read aloud. "On all counts." Valentina's shoulders slumped. Her lawyer touched her arm, whispering something useless. It didn't matter. She would face sentencing in 30 days, but the verdict was already a lifetime in consequence. When Serena read the headline later that night, she didn't smile. There was no victory in watching another woman fall. Even if that woman had mocked her, ruined her marriage, and bled millions from a company Serena once helped build. Serena sat alone in her living room, Ilara asleep upstairs, the sound of lullaby music faint through the baby monitor. She closed the browser and leaned back. "What now?" she whispered to herself. The answer didn't come immediately. But it did come. 2 weeks later, Serena stood on stage at a Women in Tech Summit in San Diego. She was the keynote speaker. The room overflowed with founders, engineers, developers. many of them young women who had followed her journey through headlines and social media. Some had lived their own versions of betrayal, rejection, reinvention. Serena didn't open with her title. She didn't list her accolades. "I was once told that being a wife meant giving up the rest of me," she began. "So I did. I dimmed my light, bit my tongue, and let someone else's dream become my world. Until the day I woke up and realized I was never in the picture. I was only holding the frame." The audience sat in silence, captivated. "I'm not here to talk about revenge. I'm here to talk about responsibility. To yourself, to your vision, to the girl you used to be before you were told you needed someone else to matter." After the speech, women lined up to meet her. Some cried. Others asked for advice. A few simply said, "Thank you." Serena returned to her hotel suite that night feeling something deeper than success. She felt useful. Not to a man, not to a board, but to purpose. Back in Oakland, Dominic packed up the last of his belongings from the temporary apartment he'd rented since leaving the mansion. He was headed somewhere quieter, Seattle, maybe, or even abroad. He hadn't made peace with himself yet, but he was trying. He didn't attend Valentina's sentencing. He didn't reach out to Serena. He knew the best apology now was distance. But he kept one thing from the past, a photo of Serena holding Ilara at the press conference. He kept it tucked in the back of his journal. It reminded him not of what he lost, but of what he'd never deserved in the first place. Serena visited the prison once, not for closure, for clarity. She sat across from Valentina in the visitation room. No cameras, no media. Valentina looked older, hardened, but not broken. "Why did you come?" she asked. "To say goodbye. You got everything you wanted." "No, I got everything I worked for." "There's a difference." Valentina leaned back, studying her. "You'll always see me as the villain." "No," Serena said, standing. "I don't see you at all anymore." She walked out, never looking back. In the parking lot, she breathed in the cool air and looked up at the sky. She didn't need revenge. She had her life back. And that was enough. The reckoning had come and gone. What remained was the choice each person had to make about who they would become now that the lies were gone and the masks had fallen. Serena chose truth. Dominic chose humility. Valentina chose silence. And Ilara, too young to understand, slept through it all, growing each day into a world her mother rebuilt with courage and grace. The silence of Serena's apartment that night was a strange comfort. She stood by the kitchen window, one hand resting on her belly, the other loosely holding a warm mug of ginger tea. The skyline blinked gently in the distance, soft lights against the night, but none of it quieted her thoughts. Everything had changed. Publicly, permanently. Valentina was behind bars. Dominic had been forced out of Reed Innovations, and now, the baby they had longed for, the child she had fought to bring into the world, was almost here. A sharp kick reminded her that this baby had her own rhythm. Serena smiled faintly, rubbing her belly. "You've been through it with me, haven't you?" she whispered. She had spent so much time trying to fix a man, to hold together a family that was already slipping, that she hadn't realized her greatest strength had been forming right there inside her. She had been building legacy through pain, through grace. The birth was due any day now. 2 days later, it began. Serena was in the middle of reviewing proposals for the Foundation's next campaign when the pain gripped her. It wasn't like the false alarms from before. This was deeper, rhythmic, relentless. Iris rushed her to the hospital without hesitation. Serena clutched her friend's hand in the back seat, breathing through each contraction. "I don't want anyone else in the room," Serena said between breaths. "You won't be alone," Iris said firmly. "You've got me, and soon you'll have her." At the hospital, everything moved fast. Doctors checked vitals. Nurses prepped her. The pain was steady, intense, but Serena was calm, determined, focused. She refused an epidural. She wanted to feel this birth. She had already endured pain for years, emotional, spiritual, relational. This one, though, this one was for love, for life. 12 hours of labor passed like a blur of sweat, grit, and pushing past her own limits. And then, a cry. A piercing, perfect cry that filled the room and broke Serena's heart open. "She's here," the nurse whispered. They placed the baby on her chest, and Serena stared through tears at the daughter she had waited for so long. 10 tiny fingers, eyes squinting but full of fight, a full head of hair, and the most determined little jaw. Serena held her close and whispered, "You made it, baby girl. We made it." She named her Noelle. A name that meant peace, a name that felt like breath after drowning. News spread fast, especially within the foundation. The press, still circling like sharks around Dominic's downfall, caught wind of the birth and tried to turn it into gossip. But Serena shut that noise down immediately. She refused interviews. She asked for privacy. This wasn't for headlines. This was for her. 3 days after the birth, a letter arrived at her doorstep. It was from Dominic, not an email, not a voicemail. An actual handwritten letter in ink, something she hadn't seen from him since their early days. Serena hesitated before opening it. But eventually, curiosity and something deeper made her unfold the thick cream paper. "Serena, I heard she's here, and she's healthy. Congratulations doesn't feel like enough, but I mean it with everything I have left. I don't deserve to know her. I know that. But I hope, someday, I can. If only as the man who failed you and wants to be better for her. I won't try to explain or defend myself. You already showed the world who I am, and who you are. And the truth is, you saved more than just the foundation that night. You saved me from becoming a man I wouldn't have recognized 10 years ago. I've started therapy. I resigned from the board. I've gone back to volunteer work, quietly. No press, no recognition, just effort. I know you probably tore this up halfway through, but if you didn't, thank you for reading. Always, Dominic." She read it twice. Then she folded it, placed it in a drawer, and stared out her window. Not out of pain, but out of clarity. Dominic was trying to change. But that didn't mean she owed him anything more than space to become someone better. Noelle deserved a father who showed up. Not just financially, not just for photo ops, but in the everyday moments. Diaper changes, sleepless nights, first words, real work. Serena would make sure of it. A week later, Dominic was invited, by Serena, to meet his daughter. He arrived at her apartment building, looking unsure of himself. No bodyguards, no suit, just jeans and a collared shirt. He carried nothing but a small plush elephant in one hand and visible nerves in the other. When Serena opened the door, he didn't speak. She didn't invite him in right away either. Instead, she held Noelle in her arms, wrapped in a soft pink blanket. "She's asleep," Serena said flatly. Dominic nodded, trying to steady his breathing. "Can I sit?" She stepped aside and motioned to a chair. Dominic sat down and stared at his daughter like she was sunlight he hadn't earned. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She's strong," Serena replied. He smiled faintly. Like her mom, a long silence stretched. "I'm not asking for anything," Dominic said. "I just wanted to see her." "And what do you want her to see when she looks at you?" Serena asked. Dominic swallowed. A man who got it wrong for too long, but who's finally learning how to get it right. Serena didn't reply. Instead, she watched his face, searching for signs of performance, of ego. But what she saw was something unfamiliar. Humility, the first real trace of it in years. Noelle stirred in her arms. "She knows your voice," Serena said. "She heard it before you decided to disappear." He winced. "I deserved that. You deserve truth, nothing more." She walked over and placed Noelle gently into his arms. His hands trembled slightly as he held his daughter for the first time. She didn't cry. She simply blinked up at him, with eyes that felt ancient. Eyes that looked like his. "I don't expect forgiveness," he whispered again. "But thank you for this." Serena nodded. "No more lies," she said. "If you want to be in her life, it won't be convenient. It won't be partial. It will be real, or it will be nothing." "I want real," Dominic replied. She believed him. At least enough to try. In the months that followed, Dominic didn't try to force his way back in. He showed up for parenting classes. He made donations anonymously to children's shelters. He worked as a volunteer tutor in coding programs he once sponsored in name only. And every week he visited Noelle. He changed diapers. He warmed bottles. He sang lullabies off-key but with heart. It wasn't a dramatic comeback. It was quiet, earned, built brick by brick. Serena watched closely. Guard up but not locked. Her daughter deserved a father who fought for her. Not with noise, but with action. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The heavy glass doors of Sterling Row Legal glided open with the kind of silence only money could buy. The building smelled of ambition and polish. Inside the top-floor conference room, Serena sat at the head of the table, back straight, expression unreadable. A signature pen rested near her fingers. Across from her sat Dominic, a stack of thick legal documents between them. His face was tired, his jaw locked, but he didn't look away. This wasn't just a conversation about co-parenting. This was about legacy, boundaries, and consequences. "Dominic, let's get one thing straight," Serena said, voice even but direct. "This isn't just about Aurora. This is about ownership. The life you created, the chaos you left me to clean up, and the decisions I'm making to protect our daughter's future." Dominic nodded once. He had expected a confrontation. What he hadn't expected was to feel small. "I'm not here to argue," he said. "I just want to be part of whatever life Aurora has." Serena motioned to the papers. "Then, sign." His lawyer, sitting 2 chairs away, leaned in. "Mr. Reed, this arrangement gives MS Reed full legal custody with visitation rights for you contingent on continued participation in parental development classes, psychological evaluation updates, and completion of community service. There's also a clause preventing any unauthorized media exposure involving Aurora until she's 18. Dominic swallowed hard. "I agreed to all of this," he said. Serena raised a brow. "You agreed now. But I've had to agree to things for years that I didn't believe in. Your rules, your timelines, your pride." He looked down. "I want Aurora to see that I learned," he whispered. "I'm not asking you to forget anything. I'm just asking you to let me earn back my dignity as a father." Serena leaned back, arms crossed. "Let's talk legacy." She tapped the corner of the folder beside her. It was titled Reed Foundation Educational Trust. "I created a branch of the Reed Foundation under my name, 100% independent. The Board of Trustees includes doctors, educators, and legal advisors. No one from your camp, not even your last name, shows up on the founding charter." Dominic's eyes widened. "You're cutting my name out entirely?" She met his stare. "You already did that when you brought a Mistress to a gala while I was pregnant." He looked away. "This new trust will fund full scholarships for children of single mothers in under-resourced communities. It will provide mental health services, maternal support, legal aid, and seed capital for women-owned startups. It will also publish the full story, mine, ours, and Aurora's." "You're going public?" he asked. "Not to humiliate you," she said, "but to free every woman who thinks silence is safer." His voice dropped. "You're using my daughter's story." "No. I'm using mine. She's just the reason I no longer fear yours." The pen finally moved. Dominic signed, slowly, then slid the documents across the table. Serena didn't thank him. Instead, she stood and extended her hand, not for a shake, but for the pen. He handed it over. Her fingers brushed his. "This isn't revenge," she said quietly. "This is alignment." Dominic's face tightened. "And what happens after this?" "You rebuild," she replied. "And I continue." He nodded, then rose to leave. But halfway to the door, he turned. "Do I get to see her tonight?" Serena studied him. "Yes, but at my place. No nannies, no staff, no distractions." He nodded again. "I'll be there at 6. That evening, Dominic sat cross-legged on Serena's living room floor. Aurora was cooing on a plush blanket beside him, chewing on a rattle shaped like a lion. Serena stood in the doorway, watching. It wasn't the fatherhood she'd imagined when she married him, but it was a start. "You're good with her," she said eventually. Dominic looked up, surprised. "Thank you." Serena walked in and sat beside them. "Don't mistake that for approval. It's just a fact." He nodded, reaching for a pacifier that had rolled away. "I don't expect you to trust me overnight. You shouldn't." He looked up. "But one day—" Serena paused. "One day she'll decide." Dominic looked at Aurora, then whispered, "She's worth every consequence." Serena's breath caught, not from emotion, but from the clarity of it all. This wasn't the man she married. It was the man she might have respected. If he had arrived 10 years earlier. The next morning, Serena met with her media advisor. The plan was precise: one editorial feature, a few interviews on platforms run by women of color, and a public event announcing the launch of the foundation. "No tabloids, no gossip platforms," she said firmly. "We'll make sure of it," her rep replied. Serena nodded. "We control the narrative, not because we're afraid, but because we earned that right." That week, her story dropped on a major national platform. The headline read, "She built an empire while they mocked her pregnancy. Now she funds dreams for women like her." It went viral in less than an hour. Comments poured in, women thanking her, mothers sharing their own battles, young girls calling her a blueprint. Dominic sent no text, made no call. Instead, he showed up at her next press event, quiet, respectful, and seated in the last row. When Serena spotted him, she didn't pause. She didn't flinch. She simply kept speaking. "No one gets to choose your story for you. No one gets to write your ending." The room erupted in applause. Dominic stayed long after the cameras shut off. When he finally approached, Serena was surrounded by donors, board members, and reporters. He didn't interrupt. He waited. When she finally turned to him, he simply said, "Thank you for showing me who you always were." Serena looked him over once, then offered a nod. "Good night, Dominic." He nodded back, then left. That was the final moment he ever tried to rewrite her pages. From then on, he respected the new author, her. The new year began without fireworks for Dominic. There were no parties, no champagne, no roaring crowds counting down to midnight. Just silence, broken only by the tick of the antique grandfather clock in the corner of his dimly lit living room. He stood alone, barefoot, staring out of the window of the townhouse he had rented, far from the mansion that once symbolized his pride. He no longer owned it. He had signed it over during the divorce settlement. Serena hadn't asked for the house, but the moment she filed for full custody and spousal support, Dominic offered more than required. Not out of legal strategy, out of guilt. But no gesture, no amount of property, equity, or checks could erase what he had done. He checked his phone, rereading the last message from Serena. "CO parenting means showing up consistently. You'll see her Saturday, 10 a.m. sharp. Please don't be late this time." Dominic hadn't missed a visit in the last 4 weekends. But it wasn't enough. He knew that. This Saturday would be different. He arrived early. Serena's townhouse wasn't as grand as the mansion, but it was warm, lived in, and full of things that money couldn't buy. He noticed finger paintings taped to the fridge, a small pink jacket hanging by the door, and a stroller tucked near the coat rack. She opened the door, surprised. "You're early," she said. "I'm trying," he replied. Serena nodded and stepped aside. "She's finishing breakfast." Their daughter, Amelie, toddled into the room with a spoon still in her hand. Her curly hair bounced, and her face lit up when she saw him. "Dada." Dominic dropped to his knees, arms open. She ran into them without hesitation. Serena watched quietly, arms folded. Dominic stood with Amelie in his arms. "Would you like to come with us today?" Serena blinked. "Us? I mean, you, if you're comfortable. I want to show her something. But I also want to show you." She studied him. He didn't look polished. He looked honest, tired but trying. "I'll get my coat." They drove in silence. Serena sat in the front, Amelie in the back, babbling to herself. Dominic gripped the wheel tightly, his heart pounding harder the closer they got. When he pulled into the lot of the community tech center, Serena turned to him. "This place looks familiar." He nodded. "This is the pilot program you and I once dreamed of. Remember? A mobile tech classroom for underserved neighborhoods. We had that napkin sketch and said we'd build it when we made it." He exhaled. "Well, I never made it. Not really, but I invested in it anyway." Quietly, "You funded this?" she asked, stunned. "I sold my last Reed Innovations shares to do it." Serena was speechless. A group of middle schoolers was exiting the center when Amelie's voice broke through the moment. "School, Mama?" Serena smiled. "Yes, baby." Something like school. Dominic walked them inside. The center had bright computers, free coding courses, and instructors from local colleges. Students of all backgrounds. No luxury, no flash, just purpose. "I come here twice a week to mentor," Dominic said. He walked over to a teen working on an app prototype. "This is Daryl. He's developing a speech-to-text program for students with dyslexia." The teen grinned. "Mr. Reed taught me how to build my first circuit." Serena's eyes glistened. "Why didn't you tell me you were doing this?" she asked quietly. "Because I didn't want praise," he answered. "I wanted peace." They sat on a bench outside afterward. Amelie had dozed off in her car seat. Serena broke the silence. "You're different." "I had to be," Dominic said. "I had to look at the wreckage and realize that I caused it. There was no scandal, no scheme, just choices. And I want her," he motioned to the sleeping toddler, "to grow up with a father who doesn't run from consequences." Serena stared out into the street. "You could have built this center while we were still married." "I could have," he admitted. "But I was too obsessed with building empires and breaking records. I didn't see that what mattered was sitting across from me every night asking for help." He turned to her. "I'll never ask you for reconciliation, but I will keep showing up for Amelie, and if you ever need help with anything, call me. Not for me, for her." Serena nodded, her voice softer now. "That's all I ever wanted." Back at her townhouse, he carried the sleeping child inside and laid her gently on the couch. Serena walked him to the door. He hesitated. "Thank you for coming today." "Thank you for showing me something worth seeing," she replied. He walked away with no kiss, no hug, no promises, but something real had shifted. Redemption doesn't shout, it whispers. And that day, it whispered into the silence, "This is what rebuilding looks like." It was the first time Amelie held a microphone. She was 6. The room was filled with parents, teachers, and community members sitting on foldable chairs in the elementary school auditorium. Serena sat in the second row, her hands folded in her lap, heart pounding for her daughter. Dominic stood by the side aisle, a volunteer badge clipped to his shirt. He wasn't just attending. He had helped build the school's computer literacy program through his tech foundation. Amelie stepped up to the podium, her tiny feet barely reaching the base. Her voice rang out clear. "My name is Amelie. I made a robot that gives flowers." Laughter rippled through the crowd, light and warm. "It gives flowers to people who are sad," she added. "Because Mama said, love is what we do, not what we say." The audience clapped. Serena wiped a tear. Dominic smiled and whispered, "That's our girl." The seed of legacy had started to grow years before that moment. After the tech center, Dominic made every effort to redirect his wealth. Not into flashy ventures or sterile portfolios, but into something living. He founded the Reed Renewal Fund, focused on inner-city education and tech equity for single-parent households. Serena, meanwhile, had become a fierce advocate for maternal mental health. Her foundation, Mother Strong, provided therapy, legal aid, and housing grants to mothers leaving abusive relationships or starting over from financial ruin. She refused every interview offer from major networks. "The work is more important than the applause," she often said. Their daughter became the thread between their two worlds. At school, Amelie brought home drawings of families in all shapes, 2 moms, 1 dad, grandparents, foster parents, and always said, "Love is different in every house. But it's still love." One afternoon, she asked Serena, "Were you and Daddy always happy?" Serena knelt down. "No, we had to learn how to be better. For you?" Amelie nodded. "Okay." And that was it. No confusion, no anger, just understanding. Later that year, Serena received a letter from the mayor's office. She had been nominated for a civic service award. She almost declined, but when Dominic heard about it, he told her plainly, "You should accept. You built something that changes lives. That's legacy." Serena looked at him with narrowed eyes. "And you turned yours around in front of everyone who counted you out. You should be standing there too." He smiled. "This isn't about me. It's your moment." Still, when she walked on stage to receive the award, he was in the front row with Amelie in his lap, clapping so loud it echoed off the walls. Their legacy wasn't built with press releases or magazine features. It was built in kitchens where single mothers sat learning how to code, in courtrooms where women walked in afraid and walked out free, in schoolyards where little black girls looked at Amelie and saw brilliance, not burden, in boardrooms where Serena sat across from executives and refused to water down her proposals. She no longer used her married name. And yet, when people heard Serena read, they still whispered with respect. Not because of who she married, because of who she became. Dominic, now teaching part-time at a local community college, no longer wore $8,000 suits or demanded silence when he entered a room. His students called him Mr. D. He walked with them after class, helped them apply for internships, and opened every session with one rule: be accountable for your story. No one can rewrite what you won't admit. He didn't share his past unless asked. But when he did, he told it straight. No embellishment, no excuses. Yes, I cheated. Yes, I lied. Yes, I was consumed with ego. But I lost everything because of it, and only then did I start building something worth leaving behind. One afternoon, Dominic brought Amelie to one of Serena's community sessions. The topic was parenting after pain. He stayed in the back. Amelie sat beside him, legs swinging under her chair. Serena stood at the front, strong, composed, and glowing with quiet power. "No legacy is perfect," she said. "And healing isn't a finish line. It's a choice we make every day. To show up, to tell the truth, to forgive, ourselves especially." She caught Dominic's eye, just briefly. That look carried no bitterness, only clarity and gratitude. That night, as they walked to the car, Amelie asked, "Mama, what's legacy?" Serena thought for a moment, then said, "Legacy is what you leave behind when you're no longer here." Dominic added, "It's the love you put into the world, the kind that keeps growing." Amelie nodded. "Like my flower robot." They both laughed. Exactly like that. The morning sun cast a soft glow over the marble wall. Serena stood with Amelie at her side, a hand over her heart as the cloth draped across the new engraved name was pulled away. Alina Monroe Reed, daughter. Dreamer. Gift. Beneath it, etched in smaller script, in memory of the child who taught us strength through silence, love without condition, and the power of starting over. No cameras were invited, no press, just family, friends, and the quiet hum of wind through the trees. The memorial garden behind the new women's shelter had been Serena's dream for 5 years. A place not only for healing, but for honoring those who never got a chance to grow. Alina's name now lived on in the space where broken women would learn to breathe again. Dominic approached slowly. He had waited until the end, knowing this moment belonged to Serena. "I wanted to say something," he said quietly. Serena nodded. He cleared his throat, voice steady but thick. "I never held her, never saw her eyes. I failed her before I even knew she existed." He turned to Amelie. "But because of her, I became the kind of father you deserve." Serena didn't speak, but her hand rested briefly on his arm. They stood in silence, not as husband and wife, not as exes, as parents, as survivors, as witnesses to the life they never got to raise. After the memorial, Serena returned to her office. A letter waited for her. It was from the National Women's Health Commission. They were naming her one of the top 10 transformative leaders of the year. She was invited to speak at their annual summit in Atlanta. She smiled softly, not for the award, but for the timing. 10 years ago, she would have celebrated by calling Dominic, planning a dinner, buying a new dress. Now? She picked up Amelie from school early and took her to their favorite bookstore cafe. They read 3 picture books, split a brownie, and then went home to plant new sunflowers in the yard. That night, Serena whispered to her daughter as she slept, "Your sister made me brave, but you made me whole." Later that week, Serena drove past the gala venue where everything had fallen apart. The building had a new name now, new signage, new ownership, but she remembered the carpet, the hallway, the echo of that slap, the red face of Dominic, the stare of Valentina. Funny how moments so violent could fade behind softer ones. She had spoken on bigger stages since, felt deeper pain since, felt stronger joy since. That night had once defined her. Now, it was a closed book. Not forgotten, but finished. She met Dominic one last time that spring. He asked to visit Alina's memorial again before accepting a position overseas, an education project in Rwanda. "I need to go," he said. "There's more to do, more to fix." "You don't owe me an explanation," she replied. "I know, but I owed her one." He paused. "I'm proud of you," he added. "I always was." Even when I couldn't show it, Serena didn't flinch. She simply nodded. "Do better. Always." They hugged, not as lovers, not with longing, just 2 people who had learned how to love without holding on. Weeks later, Serena hosted a retreat for survivors of emotional abuse. In a closing circle, a woman asked, "How do you know when it's truly over?" Serena answered without hesitation, "When your name stops shaking in their mouth, and theirs stops echoing in your mind." The group was quiet. Then, one by one, they smiled. That night, Serena drove home, opened her journal and wrote, "Alina, Amelie, and me." All 3 names carved in strength, in grace, in stone. The sun broke gently through the clouds over Monterey Bay as Serena walked barefoot along the shore. The tide rolled in quietly, kissing her toes and pulling away the last fragments of doubt that used to live inside her. Amelie ran ahead, her curls bouncing, chasing a kite Dominic had sent from Rwanda. A note had come with it, "Teach her to let go and still rise." It had been 3 years since that night at the gala, since the marriage broke, since the mask came off. 3 years since Serena stood in front of hundreds and reclaimed her voice. Now, she stood for much more. She had turned the pain into programs, the heartbreak into housing, the betrayal into scholarships. The Reed Foundation for Women's Advancement had grown far beyond its original mission. It now operated in 6 cities, offered technology and healthcare pathways for displaced women, and ran a mother-child trauma recovery initiative named after Alina. What Dominic had once tainted with greed, Serena rebuilt with grace and fierce intention. She had stopped asking why. She now asked what next. Later that afternoon, Amelie helped Serena pack. They were leaving for Washington, D.C., where Serena would be receiving the Humanitarian Architect Award. Amelie picked up the worn photo from the night Serena found out she was pregnant, the one where she still looked unsure, swollen in the face but deeply determined. "Mummy, who took this?" Serena smiled. "Your Aunt Iris. I wasn't sure if I was brave enough to do everything back then, but you did it." "Yeah, I did, and you're still doing it." Serena kissed her daughter's forehead. "I'm doing it because of you." That evening, Serena sat at her desk and opened the final batch of letters from women who had benefited from the foundation. A former addict now running a counseling center in Detroit, a teenage mother accepted into MIT, a shelter cook who started her own organic food business. Each story echoed her own in some way, and yet each was wildly different. Their common thread wasn't trauma, it was what they did after. Serena closed the last envelope and looked out the window. Freedom wasn't loud. It didn't arrive in fanfare or applause. It came quietly, in moments of peace that used to feel impossible. Dominic sent a photo once a month, never more. always of a new library, a rebuilt classroom, or a water pump named in Alina's honor. He never asked for more. He had stopped trying to make Serena forgive him. Instead, he focused on becoming someone his daughter could have admired. That was enough. Serena respected the choice. Some people returned to each other. Others met in the middle and walked on, separately, but with a shared mission. She didn't wish Dominic pain anymore. She wished him purpose. And that, she had learned, was the true end of bitterness. The plane ride to DC was smooth. Amelie fell asleep with her head on Serena's lap. As she looked down at her child, Serena thought of all the versions of herself she had outgrown. The girl who thought success meant staying quiet. The wife who clung to hope as a reason to suffer. The woman who once feared being alone more than being unhappy. All gone now. She had burned them all in the fire of that night and rebuilt something sacred from the ashes. Not perfection, but freedom, and a future on her terms. The next morning, Serena stood on stage as applause rolled through the auditorium. She accepted her award with grace, but her speech was simple. No one gave me this life. I built it. She looked down at Amelie in the front row. I built it with a child in my arms and a storm at my back. And if I could do it, so can you. The room rose in standing ovation. But Serena didn't smile for the cameras. She smiled for the little girl who had once stood at that same mic and made a choice to stay, to speak, to survive. If you've ever loved someone who broke you, if you've ever been betrayed but still chose to heal, if you've ever started over with nothing but your name and your strength, this story was for you. Tell us in the comments which moment from Serena's journey hit your heart the most. Like this video if you believe no woman should ever be silenced by love. Share it with someone who needs to remember their worth. Subscribe and turn on the bell for more stories where strength wins. Your support helps keep stories like Serena's alive, and someone out there needs to hear this one.